Evening slides over the Savanna like a thin shawl, and the dust that glowed all day turns soft as flour. Far off, a cowbell answers a second bell, then grows quiet. Tonight we move slowly, no hurry, no drama, beside Maasai herders who know the long dry months the way a reader knows a favorite book, by touch, by rhythm, by the calm of what comes next. Routes are remembered more than measured. Water is shared with patience. Leather thongs are mended by firelight. If you feel your breath wanting to match the slow step of cattle at dusk, let it. We'll drift across open country, learning how a season of thirst teaches gentleness, and how a first hint of rain teaches gratitude. Markets arrive like rain showers, localized, anticipated, and carrying more than they look. On the Savanna, a market is not only a place to buy, it is a place where routes overlap on purpose and information changes hands as gently as gourds. The road in is a braid of errands: milk to sell, salt to fetch, a strap to replace, needles to find, a cousin's message to deliver, 3 questions for the veterinary tent, and 1 for the ironmonger who keeps the tweezers that understand thorn better than most fingers do. Morning dust is softer where many feet agree. Bales of wire sit under a top that sighs, sacks of maize lean into one another like gossiping elders, and salt blocks look like pale bricks of calm. Milk arrives in calabashes, then into jars that bear the faint perfume of last week's washing, smoke and sun. The first business is courtesy: hands, eyes, names. A seller tips a jar, not to boast yield, but to show clarity, a quiet quality test understood by everyone. Coins come later. The greeting is the receipt, salt is the day's anchor purchase. In drought it's rationed with ceremony. After rain it's celebrated with restraint. A good block is heavy, corners sharp, surface clean of damp. The trader knocks it once with a knuckle. The sound tells density. Herders choose one and tie it into an old cloth, measured against a palm, 2 moons. That means enough licks for the herd if placed wisely, in the shade, on a flat stone, away from mud and temptation. The block rides home like a guest of honor, but one who will work for his supper. Tools have personalities here. Tweezers are asked for by description, the one that doesn't blink, meaning firm, aligned, and fine. The ironmonger, smile creased by years of sun, produces 3 cousins of the request and lets fingers decide. A small file joins the purchase, for smoothing a bell edge that could gnaw a strap. Needles come in a bundle, their points hiding in a twist of paper. The awl with the polished handle winked at you last market. Today it becomes yours, its points slipping through leather as if it had been introduced to it in a past life. Beads are both currency and memory. Strings of white and red lie in shallow bowls like spilled constellations. Patterns are not sold, they are taught. A woman shows a girl how 5 whites and 2 reds tell early rain, how blue between black says water and night, how a single green bead placed where no one expects it means the calf we saved. Coins click, beads change hands, laughter edits a story into a bracelet. On the way home, that bracelet will catch sunlight and speak news to anyone who knows how to read. Even those who don't will feel the sentence land. The veterinary shade is a clinic and a conversation. A young officer, sleeves rolled, listens more than he talks. Is the cough dry? How many days? What did the eyes do? He pencils notes into a dog-eared pad. He does not sell a bottle by reflex. He sells it by diagnosis and measure. Where medicine is not needed, he prescribes shade, pebbles, and patience. Where it is, he explains it the way one explains a recipe: dose, timing, and what you should see. A boy repeats the instructions back like a spell. This is not theatre, it is pedagogy. The bottle rides in a pocket of the shuka that will not forget it, and a pin holds it there like a promise. Shoes learn tricks at market. Sandals are relaced with new thong that won't stretch cruelly after the first puddle. A cobbler cuts from a tire a sole that laughs at thorns, then sews it to leather that knows the shape of the foot already. He does not hurry. Feet are the herd under the body, and good sandals are their boma, defense, comfort, and permission to walk far without becoming a story later. Prices today are not battles. They are dances. Milk buys sugar with exact change. A strap costs an hour's work somewhere else in the week. A salt block becomes a handful of beads for a cousin who has a ceremony soon. The notion of profit is spread across days. You pay a little less for wire because last month you loaned your awl to the trader's nephew and it returned with a new handle that fits your hand better than the old one did. Fairness accrues like interest, but with smiles as the ledger's ink. News rides the aisles. A ranger says the far water is laughing over stone again. Good for thirsty goats but tricky footing for small calves. A teacher passes with chalk on his fingers and nods toward the schoolyard. Clinic tomorrow, bring the book. Oloibor sits on a sack as if it were a throne and dispatches small wisdom in portions. Cover the well tonight. Wind will turn mischievous. A young mother asks if anyone has seen the bold jackal. 3 people have. They draw its route. In dust with toes, and a child volunteers to carry the memory home because children's pockets are deepest. Lunch is buying and blessing both. A fritter ringed in paper leaves a trace of oil that will fuel a long afternoon. Tea is poured from a kettle that has opinions. It will not empty unless asked twice. Spoons clink against enamel mugs. Counting, talking, thinking. A dog lies under the table with the gravitas of someone who knows the price of everything that matters. For pats, 2 sips of water, 1 scrap, bed later under stars. Sometimes the market holds small miracles. A man arrives with a radio's back. Fixed. 2 screws replaced by others that do not match but hold better. He refuses extra. The radio belonged to a voice that kept the whole village steady in dust months. Tomorrow, the 9 p.m. bulletin will speak again, and night will be more obedient. Someone else found the exact shade of blue beaten aunt had despaired of finding. She will finish the pattern that rested too long, and a child will dance with wrists like annotated sky. By mid-afternoon, the market exhales. Bales are smaller, voices lower, list shorter. Purchases divide into now and later. The salt ride's wrapped. Beads nest in a cloth that used to be a baby's. Wire coils around itself like a snake that forgot to be scary. The veterinary tent folds its shade like a closing book. Instructions walk away in 3 languages: Ma, Swahili, and the body's grammar of nods and measured steps. There is no stampede toward the exit. Roots uncurl in opposite directions and turn into lanes, then tracks, then the soft deliberateness of home. On the walk back, the herd swings toward the path the salt prefers, as if they could smell it through cloth. Children carry messages with the pride of couriers. Clinic at 10, calf tonic half dose. Ranger says lion tracks near the fig. Oloibor laughs. Dogs test the new sandals, smell and approve. Someone holds the tweezers up to the light, testing their bite on a thread, and smiles at the lack of wobble. The promise that a thorn will have a short career. Evening makes a ledger out of the kraal floor. Purchasers lay themselves down. Bead packets in a tin, strap in a coil, tweezers in the pouch by the door, medicine in the shelf shadow, salt on its stone, wire under a mat where feet won't find it at midnight. Milk pours into kettles that boil as if they, too, had been to market and seen the world. Tea performs its old ria, the hiss, the swell, the thin sweet, the quiet, and which cup goes to whom is an economy more precise than any with coins. Markets do not fix drought and they do not prevent rain. They tune the days between. They give names and edges to the tasks that will fill the next week. They keep leather obedient, hooves uninteresting, straps honest, beads eloquent, and salt polite. The quiet economics of hooves is this: walk out with good manners, walk back with a little more future in your hands. A herd is not a number. It is a choir of personalities, each with a coat like a sentence and a name that fits the mouth. Among the Maasai, cattle names carry more than sound: color, horn shape, a quirk of stride, a remembered storm, the hand that first calmed a fretful calf. A red-hided cow with white knees might be named for dawn. A steer with horns like polite crescents might borrow the word for moon. A heifer who refused to drink until a child sang becomes song, and forever the gourd comes quicker for her. Names teach work. The bold one walks the rim and shows the route when grass is uncertain. The doubter is kept in the middle where shoulders speak reassurance. The fast learner is given a light bell because the herd will read her decisions. Children. Practice these assignments the way other children practice sums. Who leads today? Dawn. Who stays beside the new calf? Song. Who tempts the herd to trouble? And three voices answer one name at once, laughing, and the stick lifts with a chin toward a different patch so trouble becomes story rather than incident. Lineage is a long thread braided through seasons. An elder points, not at the cow, but at the space behind her. Her mother walked well on stones. Her mother's mother did not argue with drought. Bulls enter the tail at measured intervals. Chosen not only by looks but by manners, how they stand when wind grows curious, how they face the gate without rushing it, how their calves carry heads after a week on poor graze. The vocabulary is practical. Strong hocks, honest hooves, good milk that behaves in heat, skin that ignores flies, ribs that soften quickly after the first rain. There is poetry in this, but it lives under the skin. The surface reads like a checklist on a market day. Color is not fashion. It is a shorthand in tall grass. A white patch at the shoulder becomes a lighthouse when dusk folds around thorn. A black flank seen sideways means shade to share. Red hides drink sun and announce heat fatigue sooner. They ask for a longer noon and get it. Spotted coats disappear and reappear in wind. Useful when you want a herd to be wide without becoming lost. Horns write their own script. Upturned for confidence without quarrel. Straight for cautious temper. Sweeping for a cow who clears A. Path through stubborn shrubs without making a speech about it. Calves inherit more than legs. They inherit the mood of the hand that first steadied them and the smell of the cloth that wiped their noses on the day they learned water. The child who took that job becomes part of the calf's name, song's boy's girl for a while, until a more elegant name arrives. Those pairings, child and calf, are small apprenticeships in husbandry. The child learns patience with hunger, feed calf before you sip, patience with fear, stand, don't chase, patience with time. A good bond is made of many unremarkable minutes. The calf learns that voices have edges you can follow even when eyes are busy. Selection, quiet and constant, happens in motions more than in ceremonies. As hooves file themselves on pebbles, herders note which stride returns squarely, which deviates. As salt is licked, they watch tongues, gums, the speed of appetite, metabolism made visible. As the herd pauses in noon shade, they watch breath rise and fall. A rib that insists on being seen after 2 weeks of green earns a place nearer easier roots. Choice can be kindness. The cow whose milk carries the memory of heat is milked earlier when shade is deepest. Her line will be watched, not scolded. Milk itself is a teacher. Its taste tells of pasture and patience. A sour flicker on the tongue. After an easy day says clean the gourds neck more fiercely. A thinness that arrives after a long climb says tomorrow we contour earlier. The herd becomes feedback embodied. Humans adjust, and the ledger in the mind gets another neat entry. Markets respect this ledger. A jar from the calm cow draws a little more coin because its predictability is a promise. A jar from a first calver sells with a story and a smile and a promise to return next week. Culling is not an ugly word here. It is the grammar of keeping promises. An animal that cannot stay sound without borrowing too much from the group is traded early and honestly, with a sentence about why written into the price. Mercy is not sentiment. It is good accounting with a soft voice. The animal leaves before a long argument begins, and the herd thanks the decision by walking easier. Children learn this gently. No theatrics, no sudden absence. A cow leaves on a market day, and that evening the beads count an extra white for we did the adult thing. Ceremony arrives in threads rather than drums. At a naming, informal, under an acacia while bells consider whether to ring, a girl drops 2 beads into a tin and says the calf's name aloud, once for the ears at the boma, once for the ears that will hear the bell on distant days. A boy touches the calf's forehead and then his own, a balancing act older than any radio. Elders approve by not correcting. They sip tea and let the name walk out into the pasture. The calf does not mind. She is busy learning grass. Weather joins the selection committee. In drought years, the herd's keepers learn which hides reject flies with little complaint. Those lines earn more daughters. In wet years, heavy-hoofed animals that churn soft ground are gently set towards sales and feasts. Lighter footsteps become the garden of tomorrow's roots. A bull with horns that invites snagging on thorn is asked to prove he can carry those decorations without dishing the fence. If he argues with every branch, his son will need a different name, and perhaps a different job. Nothing is cruel here. Everything is exact. Dogs play a role in choosing, too. A dog who likes to walk beside a particular cow tells you the cow's place in the herd's mood. The ones dogs ignore without meaning to are already excellent. The ones dogs cannot leave alone need watching. Or praise, depending on whether the attention is anxiety or affection. Even goats, those cheerful saboteurs of line and list, map preferences. They walk behind the cow who will slow for a moment at rough ground. They avoid the one who never admits she is thirsty. Each creature annotates the book. The book, the real, paper one, has few pages and many years. In it are the sketched horns of cows who became proverbs, a list of bulls who returned good feet, a little drawing of the well when it wore a new rim of stone, a note about the year when salt had to come from father and how tongues grew patient. The rest of the recording lives in wrists and shoulders, and how a staff tilts when a particular name is called. Memory is a muscle. The herd keeps it strong. At dusk, names are counted before heads. Dawn. A bell, a slow blink. Song. A brush of flank in passing. Moon. His shadow at the gate. Children chime in, not to prove they know, but because saying names is a way of closing the day with gratitude. Each answer is a receipt for miles walked, grass found, water shared, choices made. The thorn. Gate shuts on a circle of characters, not units, and the night inherits a story, not an inventory. When rains wander away again, the science of choosing does not panic. It narrows its focus. Strong hocks, calm lungs, thrifty bellies. These become adjectives the way brave and clever adorn heroes in other tales. The herd holds through careful adjectives. People hold, too. They free a tired cow from the front rank and let her walk behind laughter for a week. They move salt 2 handspans within shade. They look over a calf's ears and decide, without saying it, that her name fits the future. By the time stars begin their own naming overhead, the kral's roll call reads like a poem. Dawn, song, moon, little thorn, river's daughter, patient one, pebblefoot, cloud's nephew. The poem doesn't need to be written. It needs to be walked again tomorrow. On the Savanna, meals are made to travel. They must fit into Hoove's tempo, into mornings that leave early and nights that finish late. Among the Maasai, foodways are a kind technology, milk handled like treasure, blood taken sparingly and skillfully from a neck vein without harm, meat reserved for intervals that matter, ceremony, recovery, community. Nothing is spectacle. Everything is continuity. Milk is the daily pillar. Calabashes are smoked with the sweet patience of slow embers. The smoke lays a thin, protective grammar on the gourd's inner walls, flavoring and guarding. Morning milk is poured warm, then cooled by breeze and shade. Evening milk thickens into a soft sour that tastes like rest. Hygiene is choreography. Rinse, smoke, dry, cap, each step small enough to remember, important enough to keep the season quiet. Children learn the wrist turn that pours without foam, and the ear for the kettles just before boil. Too hot and milk sulks, just right and it smiles. Blood is a bridge, not a feast. In the hardest stretches, a thin draw renewed at intervals keeps elders walking and herders dizzy at noon. The act is ritualized for safety and for calm. A soft rope, a practiced prick from steady hands, the flow stopped with ash and pressure, the animal soothed with voice and salt. Mixed with milk, it becomes a food that tastes of thrift and gratitude, protein without loss, strength without slaughter. The point is not drama. The point is tomorrow, grain and fire make the third pillar. Ugali, maize or sorghum, arrives as a firm reassurance beside milk tea, eaten in quiet scoops that match the slow talk of evening. On market weeks, beans share the pot and remember rain better than people do. Meat enters the week as punctuation, roasted on sticks when a bull becomes a story completed, simmered long with herbs after a birth, when someone's future needs a rich broth, shared to bind a deal or to thank the hands that held a rope at the right moment in wind. Herbs speak a soft language around the fire. Leaves that brighten tea after dust days. A bitter strip for a cough. A root shaved into water that tells tired stomachs to behave. These recipes are kept in voices, not in books. A girl learns to crush the right leaf by savour, not by measuring spoons. A boy learns to carry a sprig behind his ear for flies, and a second for the aunt who will smile at his thoughtfulness. What grows under acacia is medicine. What grows at the hut's threshold is memory that volunteered. Travel food is engineered from patience. Dried milk skin folded into cloth, a shard at a time. Strips of meat salted and made polite by smoke. A handful of roasted grain stowed in a gourd's neck to make a thin porridge anywhere a fire can think. Gourds ride upright in padded loops. Stoppers are checked twice where wind loves to inspect. A packet of tea, black leaves crushed by thumb, lives in the medicine tin not as a mistake but as a priority. Morale is a nutrient. Etiquette seasons everything. Calves drink first, then children, then the people who will walk farthest, then the pot that must be empty before coals are slept. Cups are rinsed in a small circle by the doorway. Water poured outward so the boma floor stays honest. Visitors are fed even when there is only a little. A little expands, because tea teaches expansion and milk teaches patience. Taste is the most frequently spoken verb. Finish is rare and gentle. Markets add texture without changing the recipe. Sugar arrives in careful paper, measured for tea and for the day when a child must be coaxed out of a fever. Oil returns in a bottle wrapped like a present, a thin gloss for a festival fritter. Salt is both kitchen and kraal, on tongues and on blocks, in pots and at thresholds to tame mud. The ironmonger's pan changes how quickly a stew agrees to be stew. The cobbler's new sole means the cook reaches the well without a thorn and returns in time to save the milk from sulk. Feasts collect months into hours. A heifer's first milk, a naming. A return from long pasture. A wedding. Meat is cut with the quiet competence that comes from doing a thing rarely and well. Shares are fair by instinct, not by scale. Elders, workers, children, dogs. Even the fire licks a thanks from fat. Beads count the day afterward. A red here, a white there, a black in the corner for the joke that made tea come out of someone's nose. Feasts are memory you can taste later in the way smoke hangs a little sweeter in the hutdin rain time. Milk grows abundant and recipes grow lazy in the best sense. Thick sour in cool gourds. Tea that lingers. Porridge with a second blink of salt for those who sweated on the longer contour. In dry time, cups get smaller, sips get slower, and flavour leans into the dignity of enough. No one apologizes for seasons. They plate them. By the dim hour before dawn, foodways have already set the day's table. The gourd is capped, the kettle knows its place, the herb sprig waits, the travel pouch nods at the door. Cattle stand, bells think about singing, and the first cups go to the hands that will open the gate. The Savanna will measure miles. The kraal will measure sips. Between them, people will carry the dry months with the quiet science of milk, blood, and firelight, calories braided with calm. Good seasons and hard ones are both made easier by the same small accuracies. On the Savanna, tools are humble, bone-handled awls. A short calm knife, a file that sings on iron. A palm-sized stone for edges, a coil of thong that remembers smoke, and yet they hold a camp together the way ligaments hold a knee. Repairs aren't events. They are manners. You touch things before they fail so that failure begins to forget your name. Leather goes first in the nightly inspection, not because it is vain, but because it is honest. Halters come warm from animals' breath and walk past a lazy drift of smoke. The smoke lays a friendly armour against damp and mould. Thongs are stretched between hands and read the way a herder reads sky. Does this one want a new knot? That one a new hole. Holes are made with a hot nail and patience, never with a knife's impatient point. Knives leave raggedness that will grow loud in a week. A smear of ghee, nothing dramatic. Teachers are strapped to sleep soft and wake obedient. Knots run the camp like quiet foremen. Bolins for loops that must remember their shape after rain. Clove hitches round a pole where a kettle's weight will change its mind. A rolling hitch on a slick branch that tries to shrug off the salt block's perch. A reef knot where two thongs meet and must think like one. Children practice knots with sticks and their own ankles, giggling when a mistake makes a simple puzzle out of a limb. The lesson lands anyway. A good knot is a social contract between rope, task, and time. No lectures, hands learn the grammar, then the music. Bells are tuned as if they were instruments, because they are. A tongue that bites the cup too hard is filed to a kinder edge. One that mumbles gets a wisp of leather so its talk becomes warm instead of wooden. Straps that carry bells learn new holes when seasons change, looser in rain when hides swell, tighter in dust when hides slim. The goal isn't loudness. It's legibility. A herd that sounds like itself is a map at night, a reassurance in fog, a chorus that keeps calves brave and jackals unambitious. Sandals are the feet's first boma. Soles cut from tire laugh at thorn. Uppers stitched from old leather laugh at rain. Stitching uses an awl pushed clean and straight, needle following with wax thread that slides like a thought. The edge is rubbed on a smooth stone until it feels like a promise. When a thong breaks on the walk, no one sighs. A spare ride's looped on a staff, twined with a bit of wire, a story in pocket length. Repair by the path is an art. Shade, knee for a bench, dog for company, 3 minutes, done gourds, the milkshouses, have their own toolkit. A coil of grass makes a brush that reaches every secret of the neck. Smoke sits inside like a polite guest, not overeager, just enough to keep wildness out of the flavor. Stoppers are whittled to a tapered truth, tight enough to trust, gentle enough to remove without wrestling. A bead is sometimes stitched at a stopper's tail so fingers find it in the dark. A split, caught early, gets resin from the fig and a binding of thong. Caught late, it becomes a ladle instead of a vessel. Nothing is discarded without first asking what else it could be. Staffs and spears are edges of the same intention, steadiness. Staffs take oil rubbed by thumb, a check for cracks where wood likes to gossip, and a ferrule tap to be sure it still rings accurate. Spears, where they are carried, get a file's quiet him at dusk. No show, just enough edge to remind brush it is brush. Both tools are leaned, never dropped. Both sleep where hands will find them without waking a room. Fire starting has redundancies folded into its dignity. Sparks by flint and steel for the old trick, a matchbook in a horn sheath for the new, a coal carried in a clay cradle for the wiser. Tinder is curated, dry grass turned in pocket over days, scraped inner bark that behaves like patience, sometimes a smudge of dung dried thin as paper. The rule is simple. Make fire small and true in minutes when you have hours, so that when you have minutes, fire remembers you. Thorn bomas are built with point and angle, not bulk. Branches lean inward like listeners. The bottom course is laced with horizontal weavers so calves can't invent exits. The gate braid has one knot that sleeps and one that wakes with a tug. Dogs patrol the outside curve as if reading cursive. Any gap is found by nose before it becomes a story for hooves. When the camp moves, thorn is unhooked rather than torn. Good pieces are stored in a tree for the next traveller, a footnote left in the margin for another reader. Sewing shuka is domestic cartography. Tears at knee height tell of a fall. Tears at hem tell of thorns. Tears at shoulder tell of a day that grew longer than the cloth. Needles thread sinew or cotton. Stitches are small, space to forgive. Patches are placed not as shame but as biography. A red square by the edge, market day trough. A white triangle on the shoulder, first rain under a stingy acacia. A blue strip near the hem, river crossing that only calves enjoyed. Clothes become maps the way roots become songs. Donkey tack is repaired by the book of comfort. Padding sits where bone sits. Girths lie broad. Knots face away from skin. A saw that begins its letter is erased early. Clean water, ash, rest, a smarter load tomorrow. Donkeys are partners, not furniture. They learn a handler's voice and answer to it even when goats heckle from a rock. Children who pack them learn the holy arithmetic of less. You can always carry a little more, but should you? No, says the old rope. Ask your shoulders in the evening. Sharpening is a liturgy. Steel meets stone in circles, then in long berths of edge, always oiled, always listening for the change in sound that means enough. A knife that's too sharp for the day's work is vanity. One that's dull is a thief. Files keep bells honest, ferrules prim, spearheads tidy. The file's tooth also cleans a thorn tip so it won't splinter in a finger tomorrow. The finger says thank you by not swelling. Resin, ash, ghee, sun, smoke. These are the household's chemistry set. Resin seals, ash disinfects and dries, ghee softens and defies water. Sun kills the small dramas that hides and vent. Smoke argues with fungus and winds. People who can afford a bottle buy one. People who can't or prefer old ways reach for the shelf of elements and rebuild good sense in teaspoons. Lists live in mouths and are therefore hard to lose. After tea, tighten bell. New hole in halter for moon. Rub oil on staff. Smoke the small gourd. Teach the boy the clove itch. Check donkey padding. Fetch fig resin. Sharpen only to kind. The last item matters as much as any. Kind edges do the work without inventing trouble to be why the time stars appear. The day's repairs have lowered the camp's volume. No strap squeaks, no bell nags, no kettle hangs crooked, no knot has ideas. Tools are where hands will find them even if the dark wakes first. This is the craft beneath endurance. Not bravado, not hoarding, just the daily decision to make small objects behave so that big lives can be quiet. Rivers in dry country are not only water. They are decisions. After the first good rains, pans join hands, gullies remember their names, and a brown ribbon starts to talk across the savanna. Herders and cattle listen without interrupting. A crossing is not conquered. It is negotiated, depth with staff, edges with eyes, and mood with the small hairs on the arm that know when water is more idea than friend. Morning meets the river at a slow angle. No one walks straight at a problem that prefers diagonals. The lead header places the staff ahead like a polite question. How deep, how quick, how honest is the bottom? Sand answers one way, soft, shifting, workable. Gravel another, firm, lumpy, forgiving. Clay a third, slippery, ambitious, unhelpful. Calves stand a pace back and watch the staff write its report. Mothers breathe out a little. Bells hush. The plan becomes visible. Entry here. 3 steps on a bar, 2 toward the reed clump. Out at the low bank where hooves can find purchase without inventing drama, seeps and springs live off to the side of the main flow, shy and generous. They prefer courtesy to crowds. Herders practice seep etiquette like a hymn. One small group at a time, no hooves in the delicate lip, a flat stone placed where tongues won't turn mud into soup. If the seep is new this season, a ring of small stones announces its shy border and keeps tomorrow's foot from being yesterday's error. Children learn to fill gourds at the shoulder of the flow, where water is least offended. The first time they do it right without being told, an aunt smiles into her cup and no one makes a fuss. Mud is a teacher with a short temper and a good memory. The first lesson is speed. Slow feet sink. Brisk, placed feet pass. The second lesson is spacing. One animal at a time through the softest gap, room to change minds, the herd stretched just enough to keep pressure light. The third is angle. Never fight the current with a straight chest. Turn a little, slide a little, let water think it's winning. Calves get a rope at the brisket and the tune they know, the low one that lengthens stride without frightening it. If a cow plants and refuses, the answer is not shouting. It is a hand to the wither and a breath, then 2 short steps together. Then she remembers she is made of yes. Bridges show up where people have had the same thoughts for many seasons. Sometimes they are only 3 logs and a prayer. Sometimes a line of stones hidden underwater, placed by hands that knew where to put them in a dry month. A header feels for that line with toes before hooves arrive. If it is there, the crossing shortens to a minute and a smile. If it isn't, the day grows an extra paragraph and no one blames anyone. Floods travel with their own grammar and move the punctuation. Crocodiles are not a rumor in some rivers. Where they belong, crossings move, not only the spot but the hour. Dawn when bellies are cool and patience high. Dusk if the water has been busy elsewhere. Dogs do not enter water where crocodiles write their signatures. They patrol the bank and complain quietly at shadows that learn to behave. Calves cross in a tighter braid of animals. The world narrows to flank, breath, and the sound of water saying now, now, now against legs that answer yes with each step. Elephants draw their blueprints on riverbanks. A fresh cut where trunks pulled reed tells you where depth falters and footing improves. A slide mark says don't climb here. Even giants misjudge clay. Herders read those notes with gratitude and caution. Elephants know a river the way clouds know wind, but they weigh different truths. Where they rested in shade, the ground is tamped to kindness. Where they entered, the lip is broken, good for hooves if approached sideways, treacherous if head-on. Children are shown these signs like letters. Later they will sound them out without help. After a big rain, rivers carry gossip, branches, foam, the occasional hat of grass. None of it is aimed at you, and all of it is useful. Foam collects on the slow side, so do you. Branches snag where the current swirls, circle there. The water is less single-minded. If the surface travels faster than the leaf you tossed, wind, not current, talks at the top. The true flow is different underneath. A herder's staff knows both languages and reports in taps and pauses that animals understand by the weight in the rope. Going around is a victory, not a surrender. A half-hour detour to the shallow bend buys 3 hours of quiet later. Ankles will not write their complaints at midnight. The long bank walk also teaches other things, where a new seep peaks, where reeds hidden nest, where a child discovers the perfect flat stone that will become a gourd stopper next week. Detours pay interest in stories. Out of water, mud clings to hooves like a joke that won't end. Herders walk the herd across a strip of gravel or dry grass that combs soles clean. A smear of ash and fat goes on any heel that hints at rubbing. Bells get wiped at the tongue so rust doesn't take courage for itself. Sandals earn a few minutes' attention. Straps tightened, grit shaken, a thorn that thought it was small invited out with the tweezers that don't blink. The next steps feel taller. Wells near rivers have rules with older ink. The rope never touches water that will be drunk without boiling. The bucket's mouth is covered between lifts. A cloth is rinsed downstream, not near the trough. Oloibor's cousin, who keeps this stretch, sits with a ledger in his head and a smile on his face. He blesses calves before cows today because the sandbar is shifting, and little legs grow brave faster on quick sips than on long ones. When the bar is gone next week, he will bless cows before calves. No one argues. The river explained it first. If a storm finds you mid-journey and the river swells from story to headline, camp moves away from the bank with dignity, not panic. Thorn boma is set on slightly higher ground. Tether points face the lee. The fire's shoulder turns to a place where wind has already learned a lesson from a rock. The herd drinks from vessels and patience until the brown rush finishes saying what it came to say. Listening is work. Doing nothing is a skill. Evenings after crossings taste different. Tea carries a mineral whisper. Milk feels earned. Dogs sleep with their noses full of new maps. Children draw the day in dust. 2 lines for banks, a zig for current, dots for hooves, a long curve where the detour met a patch of flowers that smelled like rain's encore. The drawing gets walked over and erased by hooves coming home. That is fine. The river will remember. Be why the time stars spell out their old sentences. The herd is dry, the ropes are coiled, the staff leans where it will be found without thinking. The river talks on, lower now, like relatives in the next hut. Tomorrow there will be another crossing or none. Either way, feet will be honest and water will be treated like a neighbor who is sometimes loud and always vital. Grass is not only biology, it is governance. On the Savanna, where rain writes short chapters and drought writes long ones, the difference between a calm season and a noisy one is often a meeting held under an acacia. There are no gavels, only staffs leaned within reach. No microphones, only voices trained by distance. No uniforms, only beadwork and age. Yet these courts, councils, barazas, and kagina decide where hooves will write tomorrow. The dispute rarely starts as an argument. It starts as a hoofprint too many on a lip that asked for a rest, or a salt set too close to a seep, or as a herd drifting into shade another family expected by noon. The first remedy is a sentence with small words. Brother, the lip is soft. If the sentence lands, the case ends. If not, The path widens to a tree that remembers many stories, and elders gather with the unhurried certainty of people who have walked farther than any problem. The opening ritual is hospitality. Tea appears even if sugar does not. A child brings water even if the queue at the well was long. Guests sit on skins or on their staffs laid across knees. No one stands to loom. Cattle wait at a distance with dogs drawing a neat curve to keep them honest. The tree gives dapple and a breeze that slides between sentences to cool them. An elder nods to the oldest grievance, not to amplify it, but to honor that it arrived first. Evidence is plain, footprints. A strand of hair caught on thorn, the memory of a bell's tone. A child's count recorded in yesterday's dust. A saltstone scratch where tongues shaved it too fast. No one says Exhibit A. They say look, and fingers draw the day in powder at their feet, a line for a boundary, dots for hooves, a square for a seep that asked for courtesy. A younger header speaks first, because memory is freshest near the feet that walked it. An older one speaks last, because conclusions should come from the long distance. Precedent lives in mouths, not in books. An elder tells of the year the well went sour when a stranger rinsed a gourd in the mouth. How the council fined him a goat, not to impoverish, but to teach. Another tells of a salt block that wandered too near reed and how calves paid in soft bellies until it was moved to stone. Each story ends with laughter that rounds edges and turns anger into instruction. The law here is not offense. It is a chorus of outcomes that still taste true. Boundaries are elastic but not invisible. A ridge separates catchments. A termite city marks where shade belongs to both in different hours. The long stone is everyone's compass at noon, whether or not it lies on anyone's side. The council redraws with seasons. In dust months, lines tighten so that the last green is grazed like lace, delicate and sparing. In rain, lines slacken so calves learn to walk wider without thinking the world is theirs. When lines must cross, as during transhumance, the crossing is scheduled. You're heard by dawn, ours by dusk. The sun keeps better time than any watch. It is the agreed clock of fairness fines, when they come, are concrete and educational. Not money, which travels badly in grass, but animals, labor, and promises that contain time. 2 days of fence mending for the kraal whose gate you left thinking, says an elder, and the offender nods because leaving a gate untied is a mistake that wants hands, not coins. A goat to the well keeper for the trough you mudded, says another, and the goat moves with a tether and becomes a story told to boys who will now imagine that goat every time they lower a gourd. If the case is complicated, the judgment is patient, a week to move salt, a fortnight to rest a lip, a season to show that the calves' ribs change their minds. Women's voices lean into decisions that touch water, milk, and time, the currencies they own. A mother who carries vessels to the well knows when the queue doubled. Her sentence shortens debate by half. A beater who counts evenings by bracelet rows knows when a grazing rotation slipped. She pulls a red bead from a tin and says, "This was the night you moved late." The council smiles and adjusts the map by a child's stride. Governance is more accurate when the hands that pour and mend are invited to draw. Rangers and teachers are not outsiders. They are witnesses with different notebooks. A ranger's boot prints arrive with tire marks and a greeting. He speaks of lion spawn near the fig and the elephant path that turned a gully into a question. The council adds those sentences to the day. A teacher speaks of clinic hours and a vaccine day that will pull hands from herds. Elders rearrange salt and shade to allow the errand without asking the body to pay for obeying advice. Conservation, health, school, these join pasture without argument because the council is the room where all calendars meet. Some cases carry history's weight. A drought pushed one clan's herds through another's in 83 and the memory still flinches. The tree remembers, and so does everyone who learned to count that year. The elders take out language polished by years. "We were thirsty and you were kind," says one line. "We were kind and you were respectful," says the reply. The new case borrows the old template and changes one bead in the pattern. This time salt reaches earlier. This time the well is covered at night. This time dogs stay tied near calves. The old pain is repurposed into new policy, sometimes someone refuses the tree. Pride or youth or the sourness that follows a string of hard days makes them loud away from shade. The net of community narrows. An aunt visits with milk. A cousin walks the offender's herd by the long route and tells a joke that can only be finished at the council. A ranger passes and drops a "we'll need your eyes tomorrow." The offender arrives the next day because loneliness writes a poor defense. The council makes room, pours tea, starts over, and the case, now lighter, becomes solvable. Resolutions are not stamped. They are carried. A boy walks to the seep with a ring of small stones and a stick to write "carves here on the earth." A girl ties 2 knots in the thorn near the gate to remind hands that a third was added in judgment. Salt moves to the stone appointed, and a dog lies beside it like a clerk protecting a ledger. A runner brings the outcome to the absent. By the fig we agreed, and the absent nod in their own yards because the tree's authority is portable. It lives in fair sentences repeated by many mouths. Appeals exist, but they sound like this: "Elder, I did what you asked," and still the lip sinks. Then the council revisits the place as a body. Staffs measure, hands feel, eyes return with the old patience. The judgment pivots by a handspan or a day. Small edits, not reversals. The law is precise but never brittle. Brittle breaks. Precise bends and returns. By late afternoon. The court dissolves back into errands. Staffs lift, dogs stretch, beads return to wrists. Children carry messages softer than disputes. Move salt 2 hands. Well is tired by 3. Moon's bell is kind now. The tree stands. Unburdened again. Just a tree with shade that will be used this evening for stories that are not cases. The ground holds the day's diagram a little longer, then the wind edits it away, as right for decisions that belong in bodies, not in dust. Night closes on a map that was argued into kindness. Hooves step where they should. Water waits for the right mouths in the right order. Salt is licked into health instead of into habit. Gates are tied with 3 knots and checked by fingers that feel clever without boasting. The Savanna sleeps better when elders speak and people listen. Not because power barked, but because fairness hummed. Every season bows to the next. The green thins at the edges. Frogs lower their voices. Wind remembers its old dry vocabulary. This is not a siren. It is a soft clearing of the Savanna's throat. People answer with a closing ritual made of errands and gratitude. Salt stones move back toward the harder shade. The block's corners, rounded by good months, are noted and measured against a palm. 2 weeks left. The well's cover is replatted. Rope is checked where damp made it generous. Boma thorns get their yearly haircut. Points refreshed inward, gaps rewritten with younger branches. The gate braid taut anew. Not that sleepy fingers will still honor at 4 a.m. Shovel of new earth goes to the hut strip line so next. Month's rare showers do not become doorside. Ponds, ledgers, paper and remembered, close and open at once. The book takes a line, green finished here. A sketch adds a new seep that belonged to this year alone. Receipts, in the form of bead choices and a staff's new shine, file themselves by use, not by date. Market lists tilt toward dust season stocks. Tea, a coil of thong, a file that sings, ointment for the tin, sugar kept in a jar that clicks shut, a fresh pair of tweezers that do not blink. The radio, polished and pleased with itself, waits for batteries on the same shelf as patience. Animals are thanked with the better kind of attention. Hooves get the good brush. A smear of ghee and ash closes tiny letters in heels. Bells are tuned for clarity rather than for volume. Straps get a new hole now. Before hide slim and begin to argue with old mathematics. Donkey's padding is fluffed. Girths checked where last rain's long walk worked threads loose. Dogs are rubbed behind ears and told the dry season rules in a tone they understand. Closer at dusk, quieter at wells. Polite to calves who will be bolder and thinner in turn. Tools return to the positions where night can find them. The short knife is sharpened to kind, not cruel. The file returns to the cloth sleeve that smells like iron and goat. The awl's handle, newly oiled, fits the palm as if it had been waiting for this exact evening. The staff leans at the door with a gloss that has nothing to do with ornaments and everything to do with readiness. The first aid tin gets its audit. Bandage, ointment, thread, needle, tweezers, matches, 2 tablets, a scrap of clean cloth folded like a secret. Gratitude travels by fate. A gourd of milk to Oloibor for every month he remembered the well better than anyone. A small coil of wire for the ironmonger who held back tweezers he knew you would need. A bracelet finished for the teacher whose clinic day pinned a fever to the board before it became a paragraph. Thank yous do not inflate. They place themselves in the world like stones that will guide ankles later. Roots are rehearsed out loud. Morning by the long stone. Noon shade at the scarred termite. River diagonal at low bar. Avoid the pan's lip when cloud is a rumor. Children repeat the chorus. Dogs thump their tails. Calves look like they aren't listening and learn anyway. The community net refreshes itself. A ranger swings by to say the figs corridor is busy with wild minds again. An aunt says salt arrives on Thursday. A cousin says the oil drum at the school has been cut into troughs. Spare one for the seep with the shy mouth. Ceremonies hold the season still long enough to thank it. A naming, a small feast, a bracelet's last bead. Meat, where it appears, is sliced by hands that know grace in scarcity. Shares are exact, laughter is even, dogs are told wait and then now, and they do. Those who left with the grazing party come home for a night and sleep like drums that were tuned at last. The Meniata breathes deeper. The travelling camp's light circle fades from grass like a polite footprint. Sky joins the farewell with different stars at earlier hours. Orion leans higher. The Milky Way loses a little milk. Clouds revisit the horizon as sketches rather than paintings. Oloibor, the first rain sent, moves into memory shelf and waits. The moon tests its edges on the thorn-fence and approves. Night grows a degree cooler. Morning grows a degree stern. Tea sips lengthen. Talk shortens to plans on the last evening that still smells of green. Someone says a list out of habit more than need. Salt on stone. Gate with 3. Milk cooled. Coals asleep. Staff oiled. Tweezers in tin. Dogs tied. Good capped. A child interrupts. And thank you. Everyone pretends not to wipe an eye. The kraal hears the word and sets it under the pillow of the night. Sleep comes like a contract renewed. In the dark, the herd is a steady breath. In the huts, the headrests learn again the weight of days that will hold more dust. Tomorrow is a dry season day. The tools, the roots, the songs, the patience, they are all in their places. The Savanna turns its page without tearing it. School happens at ankle height and under wide sky. Children learn the Savanna the way calves learn bells, by sleeping near it, walking through it, and waking to its small instructions. Songs carry half the curriculum. A low-voiced herding chorus matches the pace that saves strength. A rain song remembers the first scent of wet dust. A counting song names cattle in a rhythm that leaves no one out. A child hums the salt song and a calf follows. The child smiles because the lesson worked, and the calf learns because songs are easier than speeches. Maps live in many pockets. One is beadwork, white for pans, blue for wells, red for ceremonies, green for the first seep after drought. Bracelets become atlases of weeks, wrists turning to show where the herd will go tomorrow when words are busy elsewhere. Another map hangs overhead. Elders mark seasons with eyebrows and stars. That crooked gourd, walk earlier. That dim river, salt in 2 days. Clouds are pages that turn by noon. The class reads them without chalk. Objects teach with their edges. A staff's ferrule draws the contour of a safe river crossing in dust. A bell strap length, adjusted by 2 holes, says rain swells hides. Be kind. Thorn shows the word careful better than any letter. Tweezers, all, gourd stopper, headrest, each is a noun with verbs attached. Probe, mend, seal, rest. Children handle them in small errands that are really exams. Bring the pouch. Tie the clove hitch. Count the calves again. No grades, only competence that shows up in quieter days. Stories make the syllabus soft and sticky. The tale of the bold jackal who learned to respect a rope. The memory of a drought when a stranger rinsed a gourd in the well's mouth and everyone learned to cover the rim. The joke of a goat who ate a red bead and made an aunt invent a new pattern without scolding the goat. Elders place these stories like stepping stones across a stream. Children cross without getting wet, numbers arrive as chores. 59 hooves through the gate. 6 gourds for the well. 3 knots for the boma. 2 holes for the bell in the rainy month. 1 spoon of tea leaves for an evening that needs quiet. Time, 2, is learned as useful fractions. Half the shade, quarter the pan, the long third of the day when wind plays tricks, the last eighth when cows remember milk and children remember to wash cups. The radio, if it lives this year, adds 4 more minutes. The 9 p.m. bulletin is both a clock and a lullaby. The Savanna's languages get equal time. Ma holds the cattle's names and the kindness built into where the words. Swahili brings market arithmetic and clinic instructions. English appears in schoolbooks and on a ranger's leaflet about cranes near the river. Children switch without fanfare, choosing the tool that fits the task. In bead patterns, all languages trade places. White speaks of wells in any tongue. Etiquette is civics and safety wrapped together. Step around ant lines. They are rivers of work. Rinse downstream. Place the salt on stone, not in green greed. Tie dogs where calves sleep. Walk the long contour when ankles look like tomorrow's problem. Rules are framed as courtesies rather than commands. Courtesy travels better. It sticks in the hand that ties the knot and in the foot that chooses the stone. Illness lessons are calm and factual. Boil water, cool it, use a clean cup. Cloth from the pot, not from the floor. Shade first, then salt, then questions. Bring the book lives under the same tab as bring the gourd. Both are necessities with handles. A child tasked with fetching the tin that holds bandage and ointment grows taller in an afternoon without adding a centimetre. Responsibility lengthens bodies invisibly, wild neighbours get a whole unit. Giraffe makes good shade for naps. Wildebeest are stern but fair, leave their corridor. Elephants write river notes. Read them with respect. Crocodiles are not rumours. Cross early, cross smart, or walk long. Children absorb these sentences without fear because adults say them like weather, not like doom. The fence, the rope, and the footplan all echo the same grammar later. Graduation is nightly and small. A child ties a clovitch without help. An aunt says nothing and moves on to the kettle, which is a ceremony and a grade. A boy returns from the well with a gourd whose mouth is still clean. Oloibor smiles without using teeth, which means A+. A girl hums the low song and 5 calves breathe easier. Stars go on record as witnesses. The Savanna gives diplomas in the form of calmer days. By lamplight or under moon. Lessons close with inventory spoken like prayer. Salt on stone. Gate with 3, milk cooled, coals asleep. Staff oiled, tea leaves counted, beads returned, dogs tied, gourd capped. Tin by the door. A child recites with sleep folded into every word. The kraal nods. The night accepts. Tomorrow's class will meet at dawn, where bells begin. Not every season ends where it begins. When grass grows in far ellipses and near pasture starts to read thin, the herd suggests an old idea with new hoofprints. Move. Among the Maasai, moving is not an emergency. It is a craft, quiet, practiced, as familiar as milking. The many-udder that holds ceremonies and thick family life stays where it is. A lighter camp, a grazing party, peels away for weeks or months. Following water, salt, and the long. Green grammar that writes across the plains after rain. The list for leaving is a lullaby, not a trumpet. Bedrolls that know both smoke and moonlight. 2 gourds for milk, 1 for today, 1 for tomorrow, both with necks rewoven, lids that seal with the modest click that says flies will have to gossip elsewhere. A salt block wrapped in old cloth and tied twice. The first aid pouch with tweezers that don't blink, a short knife with a soft shush, a roll of bandage, a little tin of ointment that smells like clean metal and promises. Halters chaired by the fire one last time, kissed by smoke to remember obedience. Beads in a small tin for evenings when hands need a rhythm and stories ask for punctuation. Donkeys shape the move with their unhurried mathematics. Loads are weighed by hand and by conscience. This gourd for this back, that bundle of thorn for that. Nothing stacked to make a shadow taller than comfort. Ropes are checked with the same courtesy used for a gate. No surprises later. A child walks beside each animal as if beside a sentence they already understand. Keep the line, pause at water, ignore the goat's opinions. Dogs lope forward, back, and around as if they were stitching the caravan into the day. Routes are chosen by memory and by this morning's wind. The path prefers contour over drama, shade over theories about speed. Herders angle for old wells that kept their patience in the drought and new puddles that learned to be reliable last week. The first day's stop is short, more a rehearsal than a rest. Thorn gathered into a modest collar, gourd set in shade, a thin fire coaxed from a coal carried in a clay pot that road-wrapped like a sleeping chick. Tea arrives with the right hiss, reminding everyone that movement is not abandonment. It is a different choreography of the same song. Camp is a circle written lightly. Thorn is arranged with points inward and respect outward. Small boma, calm cattle, dogs choosing the downwind as their office. The sleeping line faces east for morning's kindness. A fly sheet is strung, not as a house but as a courtesy. Shade at tea, shelter if the sky changes its mind. A stick marks the place the kettle prefers, drawn around with a finger like a charm against clumsy feet. A little shelf, the flat of a box, holds the medicine tin and the nightly things. Matches, a cup. The headdress that knows the shape of a neck that has been good to animals all day. Agreements are the invisible architecture. Seasonal grazing has a calendar and a map that live in elders' heads and in the soft lore of here, then there. A hill that belongs to one clan in July opens like a friend's door in August. A valley given to sheep last year hosts cattle this time by prior conversation. Meetings happen at wells, under acacia, at the field school where chalk dust competed with dust and lost politely. The sentences are precise. 2 weeks to the long stone. Calves shade by noon. Salt not by the seep. Phones, yes, sometimes, confirm what feet already knew. A text rides to a cousin 3 days ahead. We come Friday. 4 donkeys, 40 head. The reply is a smile in words. Grass remembers you. Predators enter the plan as facts, not enemies. Lions use the low pass at the moon's first half. Hyenas like the thickets near the figure. Camp set a little further, not because fear is loud, but because caution makes quieter dreams. Dogs are fed early so they will choose vigilance over scavenging. Bells are muffled when the night feels thin. Strips of cloth around tongues give sleep to calves and mischief less to track. The camp's little fire is kept thoughtful rather than proud. A single ember moved to a second dish at midnight is both a night watch and an act of tidiness against wind's surprise. Weather's mood writes the next day's lines. Rain that aims for afternoon invites a morning that leans into distance. Cloud that stacks like bead towers by 10 o'clock asks for a longer shade at 11 and a shorter last leg to water. When Oloibor, the first scent of rain, whispers on dust, straps are retied snug, loads touched for balance, and eyes find the kinder contour to the chosen water. When it fails, no one sulks. Notes get penciled in the mind, sent at the little rise. Cloud kept west. Wind turned patient by 4. At temporary wells along old routes, etiquette carries forward like a song everyone knows the chorus of. Oloibor's cousin sits on a low stool and serves memory, lower gently. Cover tonight. Calves this side. Herders trade news more useful than official updates. A patch of boma wire washed down the gully, footing tricky. A ranger counting cranes. You'll see him by the narrow, wave. A thorn branch that pretends to be a snake near the split copse. Step high. Milk is poured into a stranger's cup. A child learns a new name for a cloud that lives only here. The camp's evenings carry the same tenderness as home, only nearer to stars. Beadwork appears and disappears, not to sell but to soothe. Leather is checked by thumb and repaired by memory. The day prints itself into the bodies, the calves that learned the new path. the cow who chose a kind stone for her feet without prompting, the donkey that endured a young handler's first knot and returned his arguments with patience. Stories are told in tired voices that don't need listeners, only witnesses. Laughter lands softly on grass that chose to grow. Some moves are long enough to become a season. A second camp will be written and unwritten 10 times in 2 months, each circle leaving the earth less stressed than the herd found it. Salt stone moves 2 handspans weekly so mud cannot become habit. Fires shift 3 paces so no single spot forgets its own color. The boma in miniature is never a scar. It is a pause mark, brushed away, remembered in roots rather than in ground. Children grow half a year in one long walk. They learn the kind weight of donkeys, the kind distance between horns, the kind voice for calling a calf in wind. They learn which song smooths the last hill before water, the one with the low verse, and aunt will say, not the one with the chorus that makes your feet hurry. They put beads where the day told them to, 1 green for the patch with seep. A black for the night the jackal barked twice and went elsewhere. 2 whites for the 2 new names given to calves beside a crater rim. Returning is the other half of moving. The camp unwrits itself with the neatness of a careful hand. Thorn unhooks, no rush and no waste. Good branches are left cradled in a tree for the next traveller. Ash is dispersed with a foot and a whisper. The water place is left as a story rather than a mark. Donkeys complain cheerfully when loads ask for a shift, then forgive. The route home avoids the pasture's vanity. It will look the same if you cross it once, and worse if you stride it twice without thinking. So you think, home greets lightly. The Meniata was never abandoned. It simply hummed at a low volume, learning the names of rain as it fell when you were away. The first night back, bells sound like they remember the enclosure. Calves, bigger now, still fold into the same middle of the circle as if nothing had changed because the important things didn't. Tea tastes like reunions. The headrest tells the neck you earned this stillness. Dogs sleep both at the old gate and in their new habit spot, just to be thorough. The list for morning shrinks to the words near graze, and then sleeps too. Seasonal moves teach the old lesson, that carrying less is often the same as carrying well. That circles can be true without being permanent. That a camp can be a promise rather than a dent. The geography of being light is not about speed. It is about accuracy. The herd reads that accuracy with relief. People read it with the ease that arrives when feet, fields, and agreements all speak the same language at the same pace. Night has its own schedule, quieter than day but no less busy. When the last bell hushes and the thorn gate takes its evening breath, the kraal becomes a round clock whose hands are small chores. The fence is a circle of manners, blackthorn angled inward, wicked points tamed for cattle but rude enough for anything curious. A palm presses along the woven places, testing for gaps the way you test a story for mistakes. Where a goat proved clever at sunset, a fresh branch goes in like a new sentence that clarifies the meaning. The gate gets its last braid tied, 1 knot for cows, 1 knot for calves, 1 for the person who will be sleepy at dawn and thankful for simplicity. Dogs patrol in soft punctuation. They carry news in their noses and reassurance in their tails. 1 sweep for all right, 2 for I smell jackal but it moved on, stillness for listen. They travel the outside lip of the boma, then the inside, then pause at the place where the wind brings the fast scent of river and wet clay. Their voices are kept in pockets. A bark is rare, a whisper more common, a chuff, a huff, a single note that says I am here. Children sleep easier when the dog's route includes a stop near their headrest. The dog knows this and adds the stop, because night is also about kindness. Fire is not a spectacle at this hour. It is a tool set to low, like a lamp turned down so it can be forgotten. Coals keep milk's memory warm and smoke's memory active. Leather straps and halters pass briefly through the drift so that morning will find them obedient and ungreedy for mould. A kettle sits at the edge, not boiling, only thinking, ready to produce tea that tastes like patience if a cough wakes or a worry sits up for a minute. Someone stirs once, the way you stir a dream you wish to stay. Above, stars take attendance. The girl who counted cattle at dusk now counts Orion's belt, then loses the number on purpose because it is allowed to be sleepy work. Elders point with eyebrows instead of fingers. That one for the early walk, that one for the wind, that faint smear for a story about a leopard who became a cautionary proverb. The sky teaches without asking anyone to sit up straight. If a cloud slides in, it is welcomed. If it leaves, the lesson continues. If lightning sketches on a far ridge, the count begins, 1, 2, 3, and then stops because sleep arrives between 2 and 3 like a polite guest. Cattle organize their own night. Mothers form the inner ring, carves a soft pile where warmth circulates like news in market. Older cows with calm eyes take the rim, not to fight the dark, but to face it so the rest can forget it. Horns lie in a geometry that would make a mathematician hum. Points alternate, curves lean into curves, a design that lets ears hear evenly in all directions. Every few minutes, a hoof shifts, a bell thinks about sounding and then declines. The herd breathes as one instrument that does not need tuning. Predators are part of the syllabus and are graded on etiquette. A hyena's laugh closes its own circle somewhere out in tall grass. The boma's thorns answer with silence and the dog's tail says, "I heard." If lion pass, rare, dignified, on the wide clock of their own patrol, dogs lower themselves and watch. The way sensible soldiers acknowledge a general in another army. The fence is not challenged because the night is calm and the herd is not complaining. Most trouble, the elders say, visits when someone forgets a gate or when hunger writes a longer letter than usual. Tonight, the letter is short. Inside the huts, night's chores are tender. A headrest is adjusted to the geometry of a sleepy neck. A bracelet unclasps by sound alone. The beads remember their order for morning. A gourd is capped and set where a hand can find it without waking the room. The little medicine tin sleeps near the door because good habits do not take holidays. The tweezers have forgotten thorn for a night but would remember instantly if asked. A mother listens with the part of her ear that never clocks out. A father hears the difference between wind and a loose branch. A child hears nothing until dawn, which is the right way for children to hear. The radio, if the season kept it in batteries, speaks once at 9 and then is asked to be quiet. It delivers its single paragraph, market tomorrow, salt arrived, clinic open at 10, and then it learns to sleep under cloth. Night prefers local programming, frogs at the new pan, a nightjar who will not revise his chorus, the infinitely patient scratch of an insect writing its autobiography on the kraal fence. In the gaps, silence is not empty. It is full of rest being made, sometimes, because bodies remember dust even when grass is up. Somebody wakes to sip water, to listen, to go out and check the knot that their hands tied and their mind mistrusts. Bare feet find the cool packed earth. A palm reads the gate. The dog performs a small bow that looks like a yawn. All is as it should be. Inside again, the kettle moves an inch onto the coals and produces a single, approving hiss. The drink is half hot, half sweet, and all sentence ending if the moon is bright. Chores borrow a slice of tomorrow. A strap is stitched 3 careful bites. A bell's tongue is checked for its cheerful clink. A little hole in a thatch is pointed out and put on the morning's list by saying it aloud, after tea. Lists spoken at midnight hold better than lists written under chores chatter. They sleep in the head like calves sleep in the middle, well guarded, already half done. Just before first light, the kraal takes a breath together. It sounds like the gentle exhale a house makes when it is ready to wake. Dogs do their last patrol as dark steps back a little. Cows stretch their necks and taste the new air. One calf practices a hop and is forgiven for the noise. The fire remembers flame. The kettle agrees. A thin bird thread of song begins at the fence and runs outward into the grass. When the gate unbraids, it happens in the same calm with which it was tied. No one rushes the morning. Hooves step into the day with the diplomacy that makes dry seasons possible and wet seasons generous. Night's watch ends not with a flourish but with a nod. The stars go quiet on schedule. The kraal leaves no trace of worry, only the neatness of a circle that kept its promises and a path that knows where breakfast grows. Evening lifts the weight off backs without asking permission. The kraal gathers its roundness, thorn boma like a soft black crown, huts, and kaji, breathing the dusk, a blue thread of smoke stitched through the air. Inside each circle of light, work becomes smaller on purpose. Big tasks belong to noon. Little ones belong to now. Milk comes first because it asks politely and cannot wait. Calves bump a mother's flank with the soft head but that says let down, then are eased aside while hands that know the rhythm draw warm white into calabashes. The sound is the island's cousin from far away. Zinc rain made gentle, a hush-hush against gored neck. A boy learns the turn of the wrist. An aunt taps the gourd to settle froth the way you'd pat a child's shoulder. Cream rings the lip. A thumb wipes it, and someone's smile becomes the kitchen's lantern, shoes a dust to ankle. Sandals come off with the gratitude of short journeys done. A basin appears, a gourd pours, hands become new again. Charcoal remembers morning and glows obedient. No flare, only the patient orange of coals the colour of stories. Tea, thick with milk and democracy, steams from a pot that knows the edge of boil by sound alone. The first sip puts a comma in the day. Voices sink a half step. Leather thongs and halters report to the evening. One has frayed. A knife's clean edge trims it to honesty and a new hole is made with the old trick. Heat a nail, press, breath out, thread. Beeswax kisses a seam. The strap darkens, sighs, and lies flat. A boy plats a new bell strap, 3-strand, then 4, tongue curled with concentration. An elder's hands slow his haste without stopping his pride. Tools sit close, the awl with its polished handle, a needle fat with sinew, the little stone that loves to sharpen, beads are the night's arithmetic. A coil of red, a handful of white like salt under moon, a stubborn blue that keeps slipping away until it doesn't. Patterns are not drawn. They live in fingers. Count 5 whites, 2 reds, a black to mark the corner, then back again like walking to water and returning by a kinder slope. A collar grows, a bracelet mends its sparrow-thin thread, an earring's loop learns to be round once more. Talk travels the circle in quiet loops. Who passed the well at midday, whose heifer will calve next week. Which jackal learned better manners when a stick wrote its small lesson on dust, children become the tribe's small librarians. One lays tonight's news into the ledger of memory. Oloibor said the rope must be wrapped twice when the bucket is heavy. Another counts stars wrong on purpose and is corrected with a laugh that doesn't wound. A third hums the milk song and gets the cadence just right by the second verse. Calves complain exactly twice and then forget to. A bell, unbuckled for mending, lies on a mat and becomes the room's punctuation mark. Silent, important, central huts breathe. Cowdung walls hold days cool like a secret. Smoke prints the ceiling with soft hieroglyphs. A wooden headrest receives the careful architecture of sleep. Neck here, cheek there, dreams on the ledge waiting their turn. Someone rubs cracked heels with ghee and ash. Another checks a thorn in a finger with that universal adult hum that means you'll keep it clean. A small medicine bundle sits open. Aspirin. A strip of zinc ointment, thread, needle, the good bandage that nobody touches except when a cut admits poetry is over and practical has begun. The kraal is a quiet instrument now. Beyond the fence, hyena laughs on an old frequency and loses interest. Inside, cattle arrange their breath. 1 deep, 3 light, a cough, the soft shuffle that means sleep has taken the front half of the herd and will collect the rest. An ember drifts up like a firefly that forgot its line. A palm guides it home with a flick of stick and a whisper. The moon flips the thorn shadows to the other side of the yard. Someone notes it with their body without needing the sky's permission. Plans for tomorrow are written aloud in small lines. Salt before sun. Lead the red-horned cow behind the shy heifer. Go by the split termite mound. There was still shade. Tell Nazirian to bring the narrow gourd. The well's lip is shallow. No one performs authority. Authority is the memory of what worked. The list lives in mouths, then goes to sleep in shoulders and feet. There is room for play in all of this. 2 boys test whose staff balances longest on a finger. The loser becomes the woodpile's court jester and fetches 2 sticks with a bow so exaggerated the goats look up. A girl strings 3 blue beads onto a brother's wrist for brave walking, and he pretends the weight makes him stronger. Laughter does not travel far. It sits in the yard like a warm bowl. When sleep finally stands at the door, it is not shooed. It is invited. Gourds are capped, beads put back in their tins, leather tools wiped with the small cloth that has learned both smoke and milk. The last ember is covered as if tucking a child. The thorn gate is read with a hand, tight, courteous, done. The herd sighs as one. The kraal turns on its side and learns the posture of rest. Stars gather behind the thatch like cousins arriving late. Somewhere, a kettle clucks to itself as it remembers cooling. On the headrest, a bead presses a tiny moon on a wrist and will be found in the morning with a smile. The night owns what it always owned, the right to finish the day's work by lowering everyone's voice. In the hush, you can hear the bracelets settling and the leather remembering oil. You can also hear tomorrow, standing politely at the gate, willing to wait. Morning begins in the low colors, ashes of blue, faint gold along the horizon, a line of acacia trees drawn with a single careful pen. The wind speaks first, and it speaks in a dry voice. It lifts dust from the path and sets it down again, as if measuring out the day in soft, brown teaspoons. No one asks it to be otherwise. The herders read its angle across the grass tips, and from that angle they choose an easy direction for hooves and feet. The plan is not a speech. It is a nod. Water first, shade later, salt before the sun learns its confidence. Cattle rise as if remembering a promise. A few shake dust from their hides. One coughs a little cloud and then sniffs the morning as if checking the recipe. The bells do not clang. They murmur. The calved mothers are given the early place in the line where the walking is easiest. A boy, still more wrists and knees than shoulders, counts quietly as animals pass a narrow gap in the boma's thorn fence. 57, 58, 59. He does not rush. Numbers behave better when spoken at the pace of hooves. The path is old, but dry seasons draw it thinner. Hoofprints become shallow coins pressed into talc. Where the ground dips, a film of powder gathers like the memory of a pond. The herders know those dips by other seasons, when the water was good and the grass put its bright shoulders up. Today, they do not wish for that memory to be present. They simply carry it, the way they carry a gourd, balanced and ordinary. A stop beneath the first acacia offers a check of the little things that matter later. A strap retied, a sandal readjusted, a bead strand that came loose rewound and tucked. The sun climbs without announcements. It simply becomes more itself. Shadows shorten. Eyes narrow against the glare. Dry wind moves again and discovers the herd from the other side, pushing the smell of dust and hide and warm grass into the air like a recipe for afternoon. A herder shifts left, another right, guiding the line by nearness rather than by noise. Sticks rest horizontal most of the time, like commas in a sentence. Pause here, step there, keep together. When cattle drift toward the taste of a thorn branch or the little temptation of a weed with a memory of last season's greenness, a soft click of the tongue is enough out past the small ridge. The road becomes a suggestion and then a habit. Markers are humble, a split trunk that looks like a doorway, a termite mound with a smooth scar, a scatter of white stones left by heat where a little stream once ran. The herders do not need to point at these features. They are inside the walk already. If you ask for directions, they would show you the sky instead, that thin string of high cloud in the east that means wind will stay steady. The faint haze toward the south that means dust is traveling from far fields and won't be surprised to find you. The first water of the day is not a lake with opinions. It is a shallow pan lined with footprints that overlap like scales. Etiquette belongs here as firmly as thirst. Herds arrive, wait, trade places without elbows. A boy holds the rope at his animal's nose just long enough to slow the first greedy gulps. A man tips a gourd into a shallow dish for a calf whose legs still tremble when the breeze changes. No one speaks loudly over water. The only high sounds are bells and a quick bird. After water comes standing, proper standing, the kind that lets stomachs turn grass into strength. Shade under acacia is not plush, but it is enough. Cattle press their breath into the cool layer of air that lies knee-high, and humans do the same, crouching with their backs to the trunk, feeling grit settle and loosen as wind tests the day. Beads are mended now. In the unhurried way small mosaics ask for. Leather thongs find their holes again. A broken stitch in a shuka becomes a neat line that will later look like a decision, not a repair. Tea, if there is tea, is the taste of patience, a little smoke, a little milk, a little sugar, and time. Heat persuades the herd to think about distance, not speed. Herders walk ahead and to the side, as if they were the idea of direction rather than its author. The dust now is a low river around hooves. Everything below the knee becomes rusty with it. In the shimmer, a shape that could be a tree is a tree and then, later, is not. The trick is to let the eye learn this without making a fuss. A cow stops to consider a thorn with 2 leaves left. A child laughs without sound and scratches the animal's neck where flies tried and failed, when the day reaches its strongest. The line thins into little groups, each with the same rhythm. Graze 2 steps. Look, swallow, listen, and graze again. The herder staffs make small punctuations in the dust. Footprints of people and animals overlap in grammar you could read if the wind allowed. From time to time a call travels, single syllables, carrying names that are not names but sounds that belong to certain cows, certain companions, certain corners of the herd. Responses are small, an ear flicks, a head tilts, a bell shifts its note. Late light begins long before sunset. It leans across the backs of animals and turns dust into a soft language. The way back is not a reverse of morning. It is its own path, designed to place hooves where the evening will be smoothest. Another water, or the same one again, now less crowded and more companionable. Salt, if there is salt, in the quiet before dusk, so thirst can be ordinary and the night sleep unbroken by dreams of mineral. The boma waits with its polite thorns and the curved shadow of its fence. Inside, cattle settle in a geometry they prefer without being told, mothers with calves in the middle. Watchful horns toward the rim. Night belongs to other sounds, the near fire. The far hyena, the drum of insects who learn tonight score the moment the sun left. The dry wind softens and becomes a breath at the doorway of sleep. Plans for tomorrow are spoken in lists only 2 or 3 items long. The father pan first. Turn west earlier. Fetch the strap from the last tree. Mend the gourd's lip. Everything else will come when the light says so. That is the secret the dry wind teaches, that going gently is not delay. It is the most accurate way to arrive. The savanna keeps its true wealth down in the cool. Where the pans dry to crack china and the riverbeds forget their own names, there are places where water still waits with the patience of a buried moon. Wells, some lined with stone, some with timber that has learned the taste of darkness, hold the season's quiet arithmetic. Herders know them as you know a friend's doorway in the dark. By the way air changes 3 steps out. By the curve of thorn-fence meant to keep hooves honest. By the cord's familiar creak as it lifts the day, you arrive early or late. Never at the hour that belongs to heat and quarrels. Arrival is not announced. It is recognized. Faces that have stood here 100 times, cattle whose bells modulate to the same mellow key in this clearing, a boy with the long arms of a future height practicing the turn and set of a full gourd. Etiquette stands at the rim like an elder with a staff. There is an order, but it is not a cue in the city sense. It is a choreography learned by repetition and adjusted by courtesy. Calves first, mothers next. Then the weight carriers who can be trusted to drink without forgetting their feet. The well's mouth is a story in cross-section. A hoop of timber or stone rims the opening. A mat of woven sticks softens the edge where vessels lean. A polished groove in the coping tells where the rope has bit year after year. The first header lowers the gourd slowly, not for drama but because suddenness scares depth. Water speaks back in the little hollow syllables of cool against calabash. It is not a rush, it is a conversation. When the gourd rises, hands move without commentary. One steadies. One pours into a shallow trough that keeps hooves out, and gratitude in Oloibor, the white-bearded elder who knows the well's moods, is here most days that matter. He is not its owner. He is its memory. He knows when the rains failed in 97 and how the well learned to be taller by 2 stones. He knows the year a careless visitor spilled oil on the coping and everyone spent a week scrubbing with ash and apology. He knows which side calves prefer and which side a temperamental bull once learned to love because a girl with a patient laugh trained him there with a palm on his shoulder and a song under her breath. If someone forgets the rule, no hooves in the trough, never rinse a gourd in the mouth, Oloibor does not scold. He tuts like a dove and tells the story of how a previous scolder made the same mistake and was forgiven by a well that remembers better when people remember too. Sharing is not a miracle here. It is logistics with good manners. Herders from different kraals meet as if under a flag of truce that needs no fabric. News travels at the speed of rope. A water point 2 hills over that went sour. A patch of grass that held out longer on the lee of a kopje. A hyena seen with more boldness than usual near the salt. Names of cattle are exchanged as blessings. A child counts out loud for fun and then counts again when Oloibor asks for the tally to enter into the day's memory. Women arrive with smaller vessels, their steps carrying the straightness of habit. They pour with a skill that makes no splash, lids set with the neat click of discipline taught by mothers who learned from others. In their baskets ride other errands, a handful of medicine for a coughing aunt, beads to trade, a sliver of soap that smells faintly of blue. They drink last from a cup that belongs to the well and to no house. And they wipe the rim not because anyone is looking, but because that is how cups learn to be immortal. Sometimes you wait here longer than you meant to. Waiting has its ways. Staffs are planted in dust and grow into a circle of talk. Beads appear and become bracelets with patterns that repeat the day. 3 whites for 3 fills. A red for the moment the wind came from the south. A black for the bird that scolded everyone at once from a thorn. A young herder practices throwing a loop in a rope. It lands like a sentence that knows its verbs. Another whittles a peg that will replace a stubborn pin on a halter. Shavings fall like thin curls of dry wind. Etiquette extends below the rim. The rope is tested by a hand that owns scars and uses them as instruments. If the knot is old, it is retied with the kind of neatness that means tomorrow will not argue. The gourd, being a gourd, needs occasional humility, a crack smoothed with wax, a band of leather tightened, a prayer spoken in the language of work rather than the language of temples. If a tourist's plastic jerrycan appears in someone's story, it is dismissed with gentle humor, too noisy, too eager to scrape the well's throat. Not as good at allowing water to sit calm on the lift. Midday at a well is a study in shade. A cloth over the head is not fashion but physics. The ground feels 10 degrees kinder in the shadow of an acacia that has been standing longer than the oldest herder's oldest boast. Cattle stand in a geometry that would please any architect of airflow. Nostrils to breeze, ribs making narrow streets for moving air. No one yells. A low whistle does more, and a lifted chin does most of all. The bright voices belong to birds who have discovered the insects that come to look for damp and find stories instead. If the well is deep, really deep, the lift changes teams. 2 or 3 on the rope, 1 on the gourd. They lean back like dancers in slow time, and the bucket rises with a hiss of rope through hand that smells of hide and dust and milk. A child takes over as a reward for the handiest errand of the day, a run back to a boma for the piece of cloth that keeps grit out of the trough. The child handles the rope like a new friend, too tight, then just right, then eventually without thinking, which is the final exam of any useful skill. Water belongs to more than cattle. A goat blinks and is served by an auntie who knows that small animals need the lip of the trough and not the middle. A dog waits in the half-light and moves forward with the politeness of someone whose ancestors have learned to share with hooves. Hands are washed with a stingy generosity, a splash, a rub, a shake that darkens dust for a second and then becomes air again. The splash feels like forgiveness from the day. When the water is low, you do not take the last prideful swallow from the trough. You take enough and then say, "We will come at night." Night invites different creatures, zebra, perhaps, or the hyena with her accountant's eye. So a herder will step back into the ring of the well at moonrise, lower quietly, pour quickly, and be gone with a huff that is not fear, only respect. Oloibor will know in the morning by the smoothness of the rope's groove how many came after his eyes went to sleep. He will smile, because the count is honest. Some wells move through history. One is remembered for the year a migrating flock of crowned cranes rested nearby and made everyone feel as if the place had moved closer to a lake. One is known by the iron pin that holds a timber bearing and looks like a witch's knitting needle. One by the fig that tried to plant itself too near and was asked to lean the other way by a dozen hands and a line. There is a well that once went bad for a month, tasting of something like rusted stories. The elders sat and did not drink, and then someone remembered an upstream burial and the right words were said, and the taste went away, whether by words or by time. The story always gives credit to both. When rain finally returns, in the scattered, doubting way it does after a long dry, the well changes character. Its voice grows lower. Buckets rise heavier. Etiquette, however, does not change. If anything, gratitude slows everyone down. You wipe the rim even more carefully. You pour without waste. You still listen for Oloibor's throat clearing when a newcomer leans too far in and lets the rope scrape where it should not. Children are allowed to use their hands at the shallow edge, cupping that first green-tasting mouthful and dribbling half of it down their chins. Laughter is permitted. It is a kind of hygiene to be why late afternoon the clearing shows a tidy record of the day's civics, hoofprints like coins pressed into a ledger. A darker patch where the trough spilled and the ground said thank you. A ring of footprints in sizes from tiny to old. The rope is coiled, the gourd inverted to dry, the mat adjusted so tomorrow's pour won't pick up splinters. Herders nod their goodbyes the way people do when they know they will see each other at dawn. Oloibor leans on his staff and looks at the sky in a way that contains no forecast you could write down and every forecast you need. The path away from the well is always softer than the path to it. Bells resume their patient grammar. Calves walk with the liquid-legged pride of those who have learned a trick and used it well. A girl hums something that has no words and every word. Dust hangs like a veil and then releases itself to the evening. Behind, the circle of the well stays in the mind like a candle after it is blown out, a shape of light that teaches you where your hands are and how to use them kindly. Evening slides over the Savanna like a thin shawl, and the dust that glowed all day turns soft as flour. Far off, a cowbell answers a second bell, then grows quiet. Tonight we move slowly, no hurry, no drama, beside Maasai herders who know the long dry months the way a reader knows a favorite book, by touch, by rhythm, by the calm of what comes next. Routes are remembered more than measured. Water is shared with patience. Leather thongs are mended by firelight. If you feel your breath wanting to match the slow step of cattle at dusk, let it. We'll drift across open country, learning how a season of thirst teaches gentleness, and how a first hint of rain teaches gratitude. Dawn does not so much arrive as rise from the ground. Coolness lingers knee-high, a thin river of night that cattle wade through as they stand and stretch. Hooves find their certainty again. Tails write small greetings in the air. A soft clatter of calabashes, a low murmur between elders, and the day puts on its first minute. No rush. The bells, slung from plaited leather, speak in patient syllables, tonk, ting, a hush of metal against horn. Their job is not to call attention but to keep company. Each note says together, and together is the first rule of dry months. Water comes before appetite when the air is this lean. The line forms the way riverbeds remember rain, by habit, by slope, by the gentle authority of those who walked yesterday. At the pan, etiquette stands taller than anyone. Newcomers wait on the rim while the first herd finishes. There is room for everyone who believes in taking turns. A boy steadies a calf whose knees still think like foals. An older herder tips a gourd so a shy heifer can sip without the jostle of horns. Mud prints bloom and overlap, an alphabet of hooves that spells out patience. Salt is not a delicacy here. It is a map back to strength. A block sits under shade like a quiet elder. Cattle approach without theatre, lick, pause, lick again, letting mineral lean into blood and bone. A herder watches not the block but the animal. Gums pink, eye clear, breath even. In drought, health is a chorus of small signs, and salt is the conductor who keeps time. When the block is gone, ash from cooking fires stands in, with its trace of mineral and smoke, stirred with water to a pale paste, that the cattle lap with the seriousness of students, copying a useful sentence movement, resumes with a choreography that saves legs. Dawn's cool hour is the only hour that allows distance without debt. So they take it. Not a march, a flow. Sticks ride level like gentle punctuation, a comma for drifting cows, a semicolon for a bull with opinions, a period for the youngster who wanders to admire a thorn. Speech is quiet and aimed, one name, one click, one breath held long enough to lengthen a stride. Behind, dust arranges itself into soft curtains and then forgets it was ever a wall. Grazing in the old grass is an arithmetic of seconds. 2 bites here, 3 there, then a move, then the kind of chewing that frees the jaw for listening. Dry stems yield their small sweetness to mouths that know how to find it. The rumen remembers last night's patient work and promises more. Herders let the herd unspool across a broader line, never so wide that a jackal could daydream, never so tight that hooves erase the same path twice. Forbs, where they still survive in pale little patches, are left for the lightweights and the mothers first. The heavy-bodied steers can argue with tougher stems later. Flies make their predictable petition. Tails answer. A smear of fat and ash lines a tender ear where bites would raise a welt. A twig becomes a fly whisk in the hand of a child who takes the job as seriously as a watchman. The herd is calmer when busy hands are near, and the children learn that quiet tasks can move a whole morning's mood. The bells change their register as heat takes shape, lower now, slower, and sometimes silent in the long stretch between shade trees. Shade is not shade unless it includes stillness. Under acacia crowns, cattle arrange themselves like stones in a streambed, shoulders to breeze, noses to the coolest air. Humans bend their knees and become small, which is to say, efficient. This is the hour when leather earns a second life. Halters are softened with a few drops of milk and worked until they lie obediently flat. A cracked strap is stitched with a rhythm that invites dozing. Beads pass between fingers, white, cobalt, a bright wound of red, mending a pattern not for show but because order is its own kind of rest. Midday teaches mercy by punishment. Paths chosen at dawn pay dividends now. A bad decision would be a climb. A good one is the long contour around a slope that would burn lungs. Herders keep water's memory in mind, even if the pan is empty today. The path it carved teaches where ground stays cooler, where roots had once held, where an old spring still sends up darker grass that tastes, faintly, of last season's promise. Cattle drift there as if by coincidence. It is not coincidence. Salt returns in a different form at noon. The story of salt. A man tells a boy where the nearest lick used to be, 3 seasons ago, and how its new cousin hides behind a paler hill. The boy traces it with a stick on dust, a map that will last an hour and a lifetime. Another speaks of a year when salt had to be carried 2 days in a bag that smelled of ghee, and how each animal learned to wait its fair share under a single thorn shadow. These stories are logistics wearing their ceremonial clothes. They turn chores into heritage, and heritage into tomorrow's shortcuts. Afternoon drifts toward tiredness without asking anyone's permission. Herders shorten the step without shortening attention. The herd tightens again into a necklace of animals whose beads know each other's weight. Those who stumble are placed between karmas. Calves ride the middle of the moving circle, the way the night will place them later in the boma. A young bull rehearses a complaint and is answered by 2 older animals who step across his front like a closing door. Herders say nothing. Not every argument is improved by words. The second water is quieter. The pan's edges glitter with new prints laid over mornings. Throats low, nostrils just above the surface. The herd drinks as if reading. Line by line, pause, line again. A gust lifts and is ignored. Bells absorb dusk and give it back as music for walking home. At the salt block, one last lick for mothers, a half lick for calves who are learning the difference between want and need. Then paths braid themselves back toward the boma. Not by straightest line, but by kindest grade. Passing the particular thorn where a strap always loosens. The particular stone that teaches ankles to lift. Inside the thorn-fence, order restores itself in one slow breath. Milk is drawn into gourds with a sound that would calm any room. Steam from tea rewrites the day's dust on faces, turning it to a sheen that looks like work, which it is. A child counts again, 57, 58, 59, and grins when the last bell comes in like a late punctuation mark. The salt block rests under the same small tree. Its corners are the day's calendar, rounded by tongues that learned, once more, the soft arithmetic of enough. Night leans down. Stars come out in numbers that refuse to be counted because counting now would break the spell. Somewhere, far off, an owl scolds. Close by, cords creak, leather settles, and the herd breathes a single slow chord. Tomorrow will ask the same questions, and the bells will answer them in the same patient language. Grass keeps a diary with its color. Close to the ground it whispers the real entry. Pale straw where roots are tired, blush green where last week's dew lingered, a surprise freckle of dark where seepage remembers an underground trickle. Herders read that diary at ankle height. From the back of the herd they watch stubbled patches become maps. Grazed yesterday, leave it. Lightly tasted, pass through. Saved by thorns, let the shy mouths go first. The land is not a buffet. It is a schedule. Hooves make appointments, and the best ones are short. Rotation begins with restraint. Dawn's first bite belongs to those who need calories for milk. Older steers learn the edges, the stringy skirts of last year's grass, because heavy bodies can argue flavor out of fiber if they chew long enough. Calves take their lessons in texture, soft tips after dew, then a small challenge, then a nap in shade while the herd writes its slow line across the slope. A boy with a staff shapes the line the way a pencil shades. Here a curve. They're a lighter touch, so hooves don't stand twice where the roots would prefer a week of privacy. Grass also speaks with stems about the season's mood. When seed heads shake without wind, there's a tiny insect parliament inside. The herd angles away to leave the committee in peace. The birds like their meetings, and birds are future shepherds of flies. Where the stems lie flat and not by trampling, elephants have talked through. Hooves give that place an hour's grace before stepping there. Where bare paws have scribbled, night's cats were busy. And day makes a slower sound passing through, bells hushed. A child's giggle folded and left for later. Eyes wider than usual around thorny corners, wild neighbors are not background. They are calendars. Zebra braid their paths through the same oats as cattle, but they prefer the taller swaths. When their tracks repeat, you know the area is still generous. When they wander off, look for greener promise further out or higher up. Wildebeest leave darker droppings and sterner chews. Their presence says the plains will forgive a day more of grazing if the herd spreads thin and keeps moving. Giraffe write in acacia canopies. Freshly nipped crowns mean shade will stay clean of snakes. Letting calves nap while eyes can rest without suspicion. Hooves need their own rotation. Their work alternates between softness and stone so ankles stay civil. Mid-morning, the herd crosses a ribbon of pebbles so edges can file themselves without knives. If a hoof chips too much, fat and ash become varnish. If a crack begins its quiet letter, a smear of resin and a day of easier ground answers back. Thorn introduces itself to soles without introductions. Hands answer with tweezers and kind mutters. The good basket always has that tiny toolkit, a short blade, a bottle cap of ghee, a match stub for heat, small actors in a play that keeps strides even. Fences on the Savanna are more often polite agreements than wire. A line of stones says, don't loiter. A string of old crates says, the bees are home in those trunks, and they earn their rent. The herd respects these signs not because they fear them, but because the herders do. And respect travels down the rope to the halter and out through breath. When a wildlife corridor crosses the morning's plan, the plan bows. Herders pause on their staffs and watch, eyes soft, until hooves of another nation pass, dust glowing on their shoulders like medals. Salt travels in small ceremonies. If the block lives near a patch that needs rest, the block moves. One shallow pocket scraped under new shade, one smooth stone placed where tongues will not scatter dust into trough water. The block never lives beside the lushest grass. That trick trains laziness. It lives near the honest ground, where herds must walk a little. Exercise is medicine written in distance. If the block grows thin, ash paste replaces it for a day, and hands remind mouths that the taste is different but the good is the same. By noon, grazing becomes geometry. You pass through calendars of shade, holes of sun, coins of cool, and spend them wisely. The herd widens, then narrows, avoiding the old footprints where a pan once was. If someone steps into yesterday's mud and leaves a deeper mark, the line shifts 8 paces upslope so the same mistake doesn't multiply. No lectures. Just a soft adjustment like moving a cup to save a tablecloth from a spill. Sometimes the land asks for a truce. The grass is down to its grammar, the soil showing its shy letters. That is a day for water early, salt modest, shade long, and grazing brief. Hooves write only their signatures at the edge and leave the page mostly blank. A header points with chin to a far line of cloud thin as pencil marks and says, "There," and the herd believes him because belief is what keeps legs from arguing with heads on the 4th dry week. Return paths are chosen for kindness, not speed. Down slopes are avoided where hocks would learn to complain at midnight. And paths are stepped over, not through, because angering that many small lives is like dropping pepper in the wind. It returns to your eyes. A calf stares at an ostrich egg half buried and the whole herd does the right thing, walks on. Some curiosities belong to tomorrow morning with more adults present, back at the boma. The proof of good reading lies in quiet, rumens turning calmly. No restless fence walking, calves asleep before the first star gets a name. The ground inside shows its own rotations. Tonight's crowding point becomes tomorrow's open circle. The gate angle shifts 2 fingers so the same patch near the entrance doesn't become a dust bowl before the rains. A bell clinks once, like a book closing. The grass outside looks tired but not wrong. It was visited, not conquered. After dark, a breeze moves across the kraal like a teacher with soft shoes, checking notebooks. Hooves relax into the hollow they made and will not overuse. In the huts, beadwork records tiny victories. 2 extra white beads for finding the seep. A green for leaving the old pan with footprints shallow and polite. A blue for the heron that watched and made every child whisper. Sleep takes the herd the way green takes the land after rain. Gradually, accurately, and as if this had always been the plan. Roots on the Savanna don't live in signposts. They live in ankles. A good path is a habit more than a line, a low-speed agreement between hooves and ground that repeats until it becomes a kind of song. The Maasai keep these songs in bodies. Calves learn them by following. Elders conduct them with a tilt of chin. And the middle generation hums along while counting quiet distances in the rhythm of breath. Morning decides the key. If wind comes flat from the east and feels thin, the herd steps out in a shallow arc so dust will slide off to the lee. If wind carries a little cool that smells like the far escarpment, feet prefer firm soil, avoiding powder that would waste the gift. There is no debate. The staff points itself and the line lengthens, small bells placing notes that mean we are together more than we are here. Markers are never just one thing. A split acacia that resembles a doorway tells you where the ground stops pretending to be soft. A termite mound with a bleached scar says, "The shade here is honest at noon." A scatter of snail shells left by weaver birds at a favourite perch reminds you that a seep hides in the grass 300 paces west, and that it tastes faintly of iron. A basalt stone, sharp as old language, sits at the corner of a cattle track. Hooves have rounded its neighbours, but this one insists on being noticed. Everyone steps a little higher when it's near. Even the smallest child learns its personality before they know the word basalt. Clouds are the high markers, a script that runs ahead of the day. A long shred of cirrus far to the south is a rumour of change next week. A dull pile over the hills to the west is a promise that the heat will thicken by afternoon. When puffs stack like bead towers in the late morning, the herd takes the longer, lower line, because even a far-off shower can call wind that turns noon into a harder hour. Herders read these sentences with eyes and with skin, the way air touches the inside of the elbow, the way the neck's small hairs decide they have opinions. The decision is never solitary. A glance passes between 3 people and becomes a drift in direction so smooth it feels like remembering. Memory records the lies, too. There is a path that looks easy from a distance but holds hidden pins of thorn, another that lifts just enough to steal strength from calves who pretend they are not tired. Those become after the rain's tracks, written in the notebook of the mind with an asterisk that means only when the grass is soft. A boy asks why the long way today, An elder taps the staff on the ground twice. We will arrive with better feet. The boy nods, not because he understands the sentence, but because he trusts the music underneath it. Some paths are borrowed. Wildlife corridors braid the savanna with old permissions. When wildebeest lines move like slow rope, herders edge their cattle to a parallel course that gives room without surrendering the day. Zebra lay down tracks that are broader and more forgiving. Hooves choose those when the herd is young and the heat intends to be stern. Where elephant have walked, the ground is pressed to a firmness that feels like a road. It is kind in morning and unkind in afternoon, when it radiates heat like a memory no one asked to hear twice. So morning borrows elephant's road, and afternoon returns it. Sometimes the route is a list of sounds. Bells soften near thorn. A lark rises where the grass is still sweet if you kneel. A far branch creaks against another and says wind will freshen from that side after the sun reaches shoulder. Ahead a whistles wants to nudge the line away from a ground hornbill's nest in the grass. Everyone heard the whistle even if no one looked for the nest. Thank you, says the day, and pays back the courtesy an hour later by letting the herd cross a shallow dip without a gust lifting the dust into their nostrils. Paths also have seasons of their own. A track that is river in November is a good shadow to follow in July, when its banks hold a trace of damp and the plants along its margin keep their green vowels a little longer. The lip of an old pan lies like a ring on the earth. The herd walks its outer edge in dry times because the soil there remembers holding together. When the ring becomes mud again, the herd will pass far around it. And the children will learn a new phrase for their geography, when the pan is a mirror. Take the thorn path. At midday, wayfinding becomes the art of delay. No one wins a contest with the sun. The trick is to make the route into a string of small kindnesses. Shade islands appear, acacia here, a rock outcrop there, and the line stitches between them with a seamstress's efficiency. Every stop is brief enough not to tempt stiffness, long enough to let rumens work and tempers forget. Ahead a check hooves at the fourth shade, not the first. There is no hurry to find problems. There is every reason to keep small annoyances from auditioning for larger roles later. Tweezers, gee, a word that means easy, and the hoof decides to be a hoof again. Direction is not only horizontal. A dip in the horizon marks where a distant river cut, and that dip collects cloud. Lesson for next week. A broken ridge shows the notch where a pass allows a kinder climb. It is worth 3 minutes of detour now to buy an hour of quiet breathing then. Birds carry compasses in their throats. Swallows flick lower when insects rise in heat. Drongos point to where large ungulates stirred up flies, and therefore fresher graze, before dawn. You learn to look where they look, not because you worship them, but because they're good stuff. When a storm threatens in the wrong season, one of those brief, bossy squalls the savanna uses to remind everyone who writes the calendar. Memory earns its water. Herders step onto the iron of old tracks that drain quickly, avoiding clay that will clutch at ankles and turn every 10 meters into a comedy. The herd bunches without being told. Mothers tuck calves into the moving center. Bells quiet as rain hums. The thorn gate at home is angled for this. The first step inside turned to keep sliding hooves from learning new holes. The entire kraal becomes a map of being considerate to the future. Evenings teach the shortest routes of all. They are measured not in distance but in how many breaths until milk. How many breaths until the fires first hiss? How many breaths until a child will fall asleep on a mat with the day's dust on their toes and their dreams full of slow, good walking? Paths home curve to collect the softer upwind and bring it like a gift through the boma door. A last glance at the high cloud says, tomorrow by the termite mound, and the staff agrees. The wisdom of roots isn't secrets. It's scales. You practice them daily until they sound like you. Then, when a stranger asks, how do you know where to go? You tilt your chin to the split acacia and the bee tower clouds and you say, we go where the ground remembers us kindly, which is a poet's answer and also a map. The savanna's messages do not travel by siren. They move by footsteps, by the bell note that changes when a herd is nearer than yesterday, by the way an elder clears his throat at the well before he speaks. Community here is not a meeting. It is a weave, thin, strong, everywhere at once. Each morning, Threads cross without fanfare, a greeting at the boma gate, a shared path for 100 paces, a cup handed across shade. By noon, the day already knows what it needs to know. Elders keep the ledger of caution in their voices. Not orders, memories arranged for usefulness. The pan at Oltukai holds, but the far lip is slick. Salt will reach from the market tomorrow. Walk early. A leopard laughed near the fig last night. Go by the long stone. These aren't announcements. They are hinges that let the day swing open without drama. Children hear them the way they hear weather, with faith and with pockets. Later, when a staff lifts with a chin, they will take the longer line half a step before being asked, because the sentence has already been spoken. Errands are the net's small knots. Someone's aunt needs a strap mended by a cousin who has the good awl. A boy carries the halter there, learning the good luck way to hold leather so it doesn't twist. A gourd cracks at the lip. Another house has resin that sets quickly. Go after shade, come back before the herd. News rides these trips, quiet as dust. This well is clear. That thorn-fence lost its shyness. Bring 2 fresh branches tonight. Tell Nazirian her red beads are found. There is no postage. There are feet. They deliver better than any stamp.at. The market. Talk behaves itself. Prices are negotiation, but courtesies come first. Milk changes hands by measure and by trust. Salt blocks find new homes wrapped in old cloth that still remembers last season's rain. Wire is sold in lengths explained with thumbs and a staff. A herder asks for tweezers, the kind that can find thorn that hides like a lizard, and the ironmonger smiles because he knows that kind, and because he set them aside at dawn for exactly this question. Cash is counted once. Thanks are counted twice. Women's paths hold more news than a bulletin board. Vessels ride on head and shoulder. Errands ride in talk. A baby's cough meets a leaf whose tea shortens a fever sentence. A cut on a heel meets clean cloth and praise for catching it early. A knock on a knee meets the calm authority of rest now, and tomorrow is still a day. Under the acacia where the wind remembers how to be kind, a circle of beadwork maps who is where and who needs what. A bracelet finishes, then a plan. When the herd is out, the kraal is not empty. It hums at a lower volume. Someone straightens the thorn at the gate, tucking wicked points inwards so calves won't learn new lessons at bedtime. Someone rubs smoke into a halter, a little medicine against rot, a little perfume against flies. Someone lifts the water jar and reads the villager's thirst in its weight. Time to fill, not yet, fill now. These are house-sized decisions with village-sized consequences. The net is woven of them. Scouts are not titled. They are anyone whose walk is longer or whose eyes like the far line. A boy coming back from the fig with the good resin sees dust rise wrong near the old pan. 2 herds nearly meeting at a narrow lip. He cuts across shade, delivers 3 words before his tea, both sides waiting, and those 3 words prevent a clang of horns. A girl taking beads to her cousin's mat sees smoke where it shouldn't be and raises a palm without shouting. 3 women arrive with wet cloths and quiet competence, and a rubbish fire that could have tried an experiment gives up the idea. Wildlife rangers are part of this weave, not outside it. A motorbike's note slows near the kraal. A khaki sleeve lifts in greeting. We saw lion's sign on the west ridge, the ranger says, not to frighten, but to fold into roots and bedtime stories about gates shut properly and dogs tied kindly. A herder replies with a report of an orphaned gazelle seen at the seep. We will look, says the ranger, and means it, in both directions. Conservation here speaks softly and carries a map. When someone is sick, the net tightens so that no thread bears too much weight. Milk goes from one boma to another without coins. A strap of meat arrives wrapped in leaves without the word gift being said out loud. A blanket moves houses for 3 nights and comes back folded with thanks sewn in. The small clinic may be a half-day's dust away, but it has a number. A phone walks to where signal perches and sends a message with more fact than fear. We are coming tomorrow. Headache and fever since yesterday. No cough. The reply is simple. Come by 9. Bring the book. The book is the small ledger of a body's history. It rides with the go bag, because the net taught that habit last season and kept at this one. Storm rumors, of rain or of trouble, arrive like goats at a gate, curious, insistent, and inclined to nibble. The net handles them with humour and with a schedule. We will know at evening, says an elder, when the cloud tells us. We will know at market, says a woman, when the trader's truck is late or early. If a story grows teeth, it is walk to Oloibor at the well. He listens, sifts it through last year's version, and answers in a sentence that takes the bite out but keeps the instructions in. Gossip turns to guidance. Dust turns to path. Children are apprentices in this weaving. They get jobs with real edges, count the herd at the split thorn. Carry this message exactly. Watch the goats but also the sky. Learn the little cough of the tea when it asks to be lifted. Find the bead I dropped when I laughed. They are not props for a tourist's photograph. They are the next weavers. At night, an adult asks a child, "What did you hear?" And the child recites, not to be graded, but to be folded in. Evening brings the quietest news of all, every bell back, every head counted. No thorns in soles. 2 beads mended. 3 tweaks to tomorrow's route. A jackal seen but not bold. A salt block moved a handspan out of mud. The radio, if there is one this year, murmurs some far headline, but the kraal's headlines are domestic and precise. You could sleep on them. You should. The community net doesn't announce itself. It lives in the efficiency with which a strap appears before it's asked for, in the fact that a well is never alone, in the way a market remembers who bought salt last week and who needs a block today. It lives, most of all, in the walk, 2 people 100 paces apart, both adjusting a route to avoid a bird's nest they will never see, because someone told someone who told someone else, and now the Savanna knows too. Rain announces itself before it exists. The first messenger is smell, a cool, iron-laced breath that walks ahead of cloud and steps lightly over dust. In Ma, people sometimes call that promise Oloibor, the scent that lifts from parched earth when the first pinpricks of water arrive, even if the cloud is still only a rumour at the horizon. Herders catch it the way you catch a word someone whispers from another room, by pausing, tilting the head a little, and letting the skin along the forearms decide. The bells go quiet for a moment, as if listening to cloud begins as handwriting. Far to the west, letters stack, thin strokes of cirrus above, darker vowels below where heat has been taking notes all day. The wind, which has moved like a clerk, steady, busy, changes departments and returns with a different perfume. Damp grass in a valley you cannot see. The ghost of bark, something green remembering itself. In the herd, 2 cows lift their noses and argue softly about whether to turn. A herder lifts his chin. The calf beside him licks its lips, the way calves do when they smell milk, and rain is milk for grass. There is no need for speeches. The day reorders itself without a debate. Grazing shrinks into a practical line. Mothers first so they can tell their calves with a glance. The bold steers folded into the middle so they cannot tempt the edge. The youngest set near a boy whose staff has a crooked end that calves like to follow. The longer path home is chosen even though feet would adore the short one. Shortcuts in new rain are betrayals. Clay grabs ankles with surprise. Old stream beds pretend to be floors and then become throats. The long contour is kind. It sheds water sideways. It spares knees. It makes for fewer rescues with laughter that is nervous underneath. The first drops, if they come at all, are not a storm. They are a tasting. They make tiny dark coins on the dust. They blow away and return. They stop to think and then begin again as if embarrassed. Every ear listens for the change in the sound of hooves, from puff to press, from flour to dough. The staff's ferrule writes a thinner line. The scent grows stronger. The throat relaxes. Bodies in the herd expand a fraction, as if remembering the weight they will carry again when the grass wakes and water stands in honest puddles. Lightning far away is theatre. Lightning nearby is arithmetic. Herders count 1, 2, 3 to find the distance and adjust the plan so that the herd never occupies the highest ground between sky and earth. Thunder offers its syllables. The herd keeps walking as if it were a distant drum for dancers who are not yet on stage. If a wall of rain shows its ragged hem ahead, the line swings a little to borrow the back of a ridge. The lee that will turn big drops to softer ones. The way a shield turns a blade aside without catching it, some rains come with dust first, a brown veil pushed by outflow like a messenger who cannot wait for the letter. That dust is not the enemy. It is part of the choreography. Herders lower the herd's profile by simple means. A word that gathers, a hand on a rump, a slide of the staff that says closer, now. Calves are tucked between known shoulders. Horns orient not to fight wind but to avoid catching it, angled, patient. The first hard gust arrives. Bells clamp their tongues for a breath. Then everybody breathes again. The gust passes. The herd, now more compact, continues in a single, gentle sentence. Paths chosen for this kind of afternoon were drawn in dry months on purpose. A gentle apron of hardpan crosses the clay tongue that turns treacherous under 5 minutes of rain. A scatter of basalt cobbles teaches hooves where to land without splashing. A low terrace of termite-made ground gives purchase like a handrail. The Savanna has always been a teacher who prepares lessons a season in advance. Today it tests in the open book did AT the first true pour. Oloibor stops being a promise and becomes a flavour. Dust lifts, then surrenders. The grass drinks loudly, a faint fizz under the drumming. The herd's backs bead with pearls that run and vanish at the shoulder. Eyelashes take on an extra blink. Herders tilt their shuka to shed the water and hold staffs at an angle that pretends to be casual and is actually precise, not catching lightning's attention with vertical height, not letting the staff become a slip. Voices grow even softer. You cannot compete with rain's song. You can only harmonize. When the soil crosses from awake to eager, every step becomes a vote. Hooves do not churn. They place. The lead herder makes his body longer, as if to stretch the path for those behind. Another walks a half beat behind the most anxious cow so his presence becomes a leash made of calm. A child, once told to hush and hold a calf's rope, hums instead, which is not hushing, but it works. The calf hears the tune and decides that feet are friends. Lightning speaks closer. The count shortens. The herd does not argue with tall things. This is a time for low ground and movement that never halts on exposed knuckles of rock. The gate at the boma, the thorn mouth, has a rain plan the way kitchens have a tea plan. Thorn tips point inward a little more so wet hides slide by without learning new scratches. The turn inside the gate has more room than yesterday. Hooves will slide a little, and space turn slides into bows rather than falls. Ash has been brushed on the slickest patch, a small spell to make earth less eager to claim hooves. A salt block has been shifted so tongues do not gather where mud could gather faster if rain fails, as it often does. Being a negotiator, then the afternoon writes a different, useful story, where the scent appeared, where clouds stacked, what the wind chose at the last minute, how the herd's mood changed and how quickly it returned to normal. The map in the mind earns new shading. Oloibor here upon a dry ground. Next time look later to the south ridge. The gully sang but did not fill. The day is not wasted. It is a rehearsal that has taught all the steps. When rain keeps its promise, the kraal smells like relief. The dust that lived in the walls becomes scent, not grit. Milk tastes like the beginning of a different week. Calves kick at nothing and mean everything. The beadwork sits for an hour while eyes go outward to watch water learn the old ways to move through grass and then into shallow drains, then into the pool that tomorrow will reflect sky and gossip both. Firelight hisses when a drop finds it. Tea laughs. Someone says, "Tomorrow the termites will build," and someone else says, "Tomorrow the larks will forget their inside voices," and a child says, "Tomorrow the ground will not hold our marks," and everyone nods because that is what rain does. It restores and erases with the same hand. Night after first rain is a theatre of small sounds. Frogs write their names, boldly. A jackal practices a new solo and is gently ignored. Cattle dream with more feet. In the huts, people sleep the way you sleep after a good letter arrives, deeper, with the kind of smile that does not need witnesses. The staff leans near the door, wet but pleased. Oloibor still lingers near the threshold like a visitor unsure whether to leave. It will be gone by morning, replaced by the quiet green breath of a day that has remembered how to grow if the cloud returns at dawn. The season turning properly now, the herd will learn new maps. Where the grass asks for staying instead of passing. Where the pans become mirrors to circle with patience. Where paths must shift 3 children's heights uphill to avoid churn. But tonight, the only necessary knowledge is that the first scent was true, and that the careful turn home was a good lesson in not hurrying a kindness. On the Savanna, medicine begins before anyone is hurt. It lives in how people walk, unhurried so eyes can notice a limp at its first syllable, and in how tools wait where hands expect them. Dry months test skin, hooves, throats, and tempers. The cures are plain, near, and polite. A tin, a cloth, a gourd, a word, the pharmacy of patience, hooves speak first. A good stride has a round sound, like a cup set carefully on a table. When that sound flattens, a header's head tilts and the staff points to shade. Inspection is ceremony without fuss. The hoof is lifted, the leg tucked gently between knees, and dust blows away in a soft grey breath. Thorn hides like a small idea. Tweezers find it and make it history. A crack beginning its letter receives a smear of ghee and ash, the old varnish that seals edges and reminds keratin to be uninteresting. If the sole is soft from yesterday's seep, today's root borrows stone, pebbles that file and firm without scolding. No lectures. Just small corrections that keep tomorrow quiet, skin and eyes take their turns. Dry wind leaves corners gritty. A rinsed cloth laid over closed lids for a minute turns scratched a sigh. Sun writes on cheeks and noses. Beads and shuka cast moving shadows that act like umbrellas you can herd in. Smoke from evening coals is medicine too, blown through halters and straps so leather stays forgetful of mould, rubbed lightly along a cow's foreleg where flies practice lawlessness. Children learn the touch, firm enough to matter, gentle enough to be invited back. The lesson is always spoken in body language first. Thirst is treated in teaspoon measures, even from a big gourd. A mouthful, a pause, a second. The body hears reason and agrees. Milk with tea is not dessert. It is chemistry, water, sugar, fat, salt from a pinch on the tongue if sweaters argued with the day. Weaker heads get the thick cup. Stronger heads get the thin. Nobody counts calories. They count calm. A child with a pink mouth and sand on their face drinks last from the small cup that lives on a pegged stick by the door. The cup is rinsed and hung again. Ready as a proverb, coughs and cuts ask for clean and early, not brave and late. A thorn's kiss on a shin is washed with boiled cold water and dabbed with the ointment that smells faintly of metal and promise. Cloth that has learned the pot is better than a sponge that learned a market. Bandages are small where wounds are small. Tight enough to say stay closed, loose enough to say keep blood. The good roll of gauze sleeps in a tin with a rubber band that remembers its duty. The tin returns to its shelf before the kettle is poured. Order is medicine too. Headaches come like dust devils, sudden, whirling, gone if you avoid chasing them. Shade first. Water next. A bit of salt. If the drum keeps beating behind the eyes, a half-tablet speaks modern language to ancient nerves. Elders say, sit here, where the wind remembers how to be kind, and the person sits, and the wind remembers. Temples are rubbed by familiar hands. No one asks big questions until the small ones are answered. Did you drink? Did you eat? Did you rest? Answers arrive with the relief of accuracy. Fevers are wrapped in attention. A gourd of water lives in the cool of the hut. A cloth becomes a cloud on a forehead. Time gets measured by the radio, if there is radio, or by the space between ladling broth and hearing the swallow. If numbers matter, a thermometer tells them without being dramatic. If numbers are not near, the hand tells, too hot, cooling, almost there, yes. A runner will take a message to the clinic at first light if the night story becomes a paragraph instead of a sentence. The book, thin, foxed, blessed, waits with the patient's name in it. It will travel too, for animals. First aid is clearer than conversation. A cough that repeats gets distance from dust tomorrow. A swollen knee earns a day of softer ground. A nick at the hock is cleaned and given fly medicine made from fat and a shy herb, dabbed with a feather. The herd learns the tempo of that animal and adjusts. A problem that can be solved with walking is solved with walking. A problem that cannot is solved with waiting. Both are crafts. Sleep is the strongest tincture. Naps do the work clinics would do if clinics could arrive when tiredness does. In the heat, a headrest becomes a prescription. Neck set, spine straight, breath deep. Children sleep where goats pretend to sleep. Half open eyes, one ear still listening to adult voices, the body deciding to grow while the mind releases inventory. Adults trade watch quietly. One keeps an eye on coals and calves. One lies down with a blanket that smells like clean smoke and warm milk and the back of a well-behaved dog. Talk is medicine. 2. The small, undramatic kind. You did right to stop. That was a quick catch. Tomorrow we walk the pebbles. Confidence lowers temperature. Praise closes wounds a stitch faster. The kraal learns to speak in sentences that don't stick like burrs to a tired mind. If worry begins to gather like cloud. Someone tells a story that arrives at tea, not at thunder. And the cloud disperses as if remembering an errand elsewhere. Tools for these cures live where they can be found in the dark. Tweezers in the cloth pouch by the door. A short knife with a voice like shush when it leaves the sheath. A little bottle with a cap that clicks and says enough. A roll of clean bandage, a pin, a humble spool of thread. The pouch closes with a knot a child can untie and retie without thinking. That child becomes the knight's assistant with a pride measured in careful hands. Power, distributed gently, becomes health. When rain returns for real and grass lifts its shoulders, the list of small medicines shortens. Lips crack less. Hooves argue less. Thirst behaves. But the kit stays in its place, like a neighbor who doesn't move just because the season does. It will be needed again, because dust returns as faithfully as birds. Preparedness, here, is not a siren. It is a tin that closes, a cloth washed and wrung, a gourd kept half full, a habit rehearsed in good whether so it performs in bad.by night's last hour. The kraal's pulse is level. A cow shifts and settles. Someone coughs once and doesn't cough again. The fire draws its last diagram under the pot and falls quiet. The stars look like medicines placed on a black cloth by a careful hand. Morning will read the labels. Feet will choose kinder ground. The tin will rattle once to say it is ready. Until then, the Savanna prescribes what it always has: sleep. Morning smells rewritten. Where dust used to live in the first breath, there is now a cool sweetness, the shy sugar of new blades, a darker hint from turned soil, and the small, peppery rumor that flowers will remember their jobs. The Savanna doesn't explode into color. It thickens. Patches that were sentences of straw become paragraphs flecked with green. Footsteps no longer puff. They press and spring. Hooves, which spoke in flour during the dry months, begin to speak in bread. The herd feels taller. Not because bones grew overnight, but because every step spends less strength. Calves kick at air that now has density, as if wind had decided to be a trampoline. Milk tastes more like itself and less like effort. A cow whose hips made hard angles last week now wears a soft argument along her ribs. Herders see these changes in silhouettes before they see them in faces. The eye learns to measure condition by the curve over a wither and the swing of a tail that has forgotten to scold flies every second. Roots remap in quiet. Tracks that were kind in drought, ridges that shed heat, hard pan that kept ankles honest, give way to low lines that hold cool. The old pan is a mirror again, and polite detours grow around it like wreaths. The lip that made hooves slip yesterday earns a braid of reeds cut and laid by hand, a doormat for cattle. Termite mounds go back to being beacons instead of bridges. Their shoulders are too soft to bear many feet, and everyone remembers this before anyone needs a lecture. Paths tighten under acacia where grass stays tender longest. The longest arc around a clay tongue becomes the shortest kindness to hooves that would otherwise learn to skate. Grass teaches appetite in courses. First come the bright tips, no chewing needed, the tongue just envelopes and the jaw remembers how delight works. Then come leaves with punctuation, A hint of spine, the small click of seed. Herders steer with a composer's ear, keeping the herd from playing every sweet note in one octave. They leave behind green that can return tomorrow and take ahead green that would brown by noon. The trick, after rain, is not abundance. It is pacing. Cattle can outwant their stomachs. People can outlove a pasture. Both are avoided by the old arithmetic. Step, nibble, step, swallow, think. Salt remains a teacher even when water is generous. The block returns to its old shade but not to its old position. Mud persuades tongues to skid and spoil. It stands instead on a flat stone, 2 handspans away from the delicious thick grass, so that salt remains medicine, not dessert. Calves find it on their own noses. They lick, grimace at the intensity, and lick again in that brave way of the very young. Hooves harden where they had softened. Pebbled crossings are kept in the schedule, rain or not, so souls balance between kindness and strength. Wild neighbors write their chapters in wet ink. Zebras arrive like ribbon paragraphs, striping the green with movement that rests a person just to watch. Wildebeest hum through, heads down, serious as accountants. Gazelles stencil delicate feet at the edges and remind everyone to look where they place their own. Birds, oh, birds, become the morning's punctuation. Larks over every patch, francolins scolding from grass that hides their roundness. Herons posted at the new puddles like officials in elegant coats. Herders read those birds for news. Where insects rise, where water lingers, where grazing can be shorter because nature has left a snack for tomorrow, work shifts its muscle groups. Dry season tasks, mending straps rubbed by dust, counting steps to water, polishing patience into hooves and throats, give way to wet season tasks that feel lighter because they were missed. Fences are adjusted outward a hand's width to keep new grass from leaning into thorn. Boma floors receive a thin layer of fresh earth so wet doesn't become habit. Gutters on the hut's thatch are cleared with a quick swipe to keep drips from inventing indoor ponds. The milk gourd's neck gets a tighter weave of fibre because milk, when abundant, can turn wild if a fly finds a party. These are chores that smell like improvement. People hum while doing them. Rain asks for new etiquette at wells. The rope no longer rasps a dry groove. It glides with a dignity that makes everyone pour with 2 hands. Calves drink and then look surprised at how much easier swallowing has become. Oloibor, who kept the well's memory through drought, sits with a grin he doesn't even pretend to hide. He tells the story of the year the well overflowed and someone said it laughed. Everyone pretends not to hope for that, but their shoulders betray them. The kraal rewrites its evenings. Smoke is less busy. Fires cook instead of explain. Tea loses the undertone of necessity and becomes flavor again. Beadwork patterns change in barely visible ways. 1 extra green here, a white placed where it used to be red. Subtle, only obvious to the fingers that count. Children last longer before sleep because the world is louder with frogs and softer with cattle who are busy digesting good news. Dogs walk the thorn-fence with the self-importance of creatures who believe they, personally, negotiated the rain. Medicine changes outfits, not jobs. The tin of ointment is still on the shelf, but it opens less often. The cloth for eyes rinses more out of joy than grit. The first aid pouch earns dust for a week and then is found, brushed, and put exactly back in reach without anyone needing to be told. Habits stay even when urgencies ebb. Rest takes different times, not crouched shade at noon, but long loitering in late afternoon while bellies round happily and herders talk in sentences longer than the dry months allow. Storms still run their errands. A squall outruns a cloud one evening and flings a curtain of rain across half the herd while the other half stays dry and indignant. Lightning practices a paragraph on the far ridge and is greeted with respect but not drama. A gust tries the thorn fence and finds it eager to be tested. 3 hands settle it. A piece of fresh thorn is tucked in where a goat had been clever, and the fence goes back to pretending it never doubted itself. The new mud at the gate learns to be a tidy path under a sprinkle of gravel. Tomorrow's hooves will say thanks with cleaner fetlocks. Markets regain their chatter. Salt blocks ride home on heads that also carry stories of seeds that sprouted in pots nobody remembered leaving by the door. Wire sells out and returns like weather. The ironmonger shows a new pair of tweezers, thinner, quicker, and laughs when a boy asks if they can find thorns that haven't been invented yet. Women swap measures. How much milk for how much sugar now that the tea has become a celebration again? No one hoards. The green promises another week. The net of errands grows loops where before it only tied knots.by late afternoon. The herd moves like a breeze with bells. Calves race, then decide they meant to walk. A cow pauses in knee-deep grass and closes her eyes just to feel her mouth working. It is not greed, it is devotion. Herders take a moment to stand tall and look out, to fix in their bodies the map of where water now lives, where grass will last, where the next truce with the wild should be made. That standing is not idleness. It is archive keeping. Evening in the hut smells different after the rains. Less ash, more milk, the sweet damp of earth cooling. Headrests greet necks that have carried fewer worries. The thorn gate swings with a modest pride. It protected through dust and now frames abundance. Plans for tomorrow shrink to a single sentence. We'll go where the larks are thick. Everyone knows what that means without drawing a line. Sleep comes quickly and honestly. Outside, frogs hold a committee. Inside, bracelets whisper against skin that finally remembers softness. If there is a radio, it murmurs about far things and is forgiven for not being the smell of green. The Savanna, for a handful of nights, sounds like a lullaby written by water. Herders sleep like craftsmen who have a full order book and a sharpened tool. Cattle sleep like drums that have been tuned. And somewhere out in the dark, grass grows loud enough to hear if you are brave enough to stay awake. Not to worry, just to listen. We walk the long dry with bells that never shouted, only kept company. We watched wells rehearse patience and rivers negotiate. We learned how camps write circles that don't scar, how salt sits on stone, how knots hold promises, how tweezers that don't blink can simplify a day. We listened to elders make law from memory and to children make maps from beads. We ate meals that travel, milk, blood, tea, ugali, calories braided with calm. When the rains came, we turned roots, tuned bells, and thanked puddles as if they were teachers, because they were. When green thinned, we put away abundance without complaint and brought out readiness without drama. This is the boring history of hard places told softly, miles measured in good decisions. Seasons made survivable by small accuracies. Communities stitched by errands at walking speed that if, while reading, your breath slowed to the pace of hooves and a kettle at the edge of boil, good. That is the pulse of a dry world that refuses panic. The Savanna will write another dry chapter. The herd will answer with the same grammar: song, staff, salt, shade, fairness, and thank you. Sleep on it. You already know the route.